Buckle in. Has anyone ever told you to buckle in? Maybe you were inside of a car, but if someone tells you to buckle in and you're not in a car, they're not talking about your seatbelt. They're telling you to get prepared to do something that's very difficult or challenging. When I took biology in college, at the beginning of the semester, my professor told me to buckle in, and I had to study so much for that class. It was so difficult. So he was telling me to prepare for a difficult semester of a course. When someone keeps just talking and talking and talking, and you want them to get to the point, the main point that you need to know, you might want to say, cut to the chase. Now, this idiom means get to the main point, stop rambling. But you got to be careful with this idiom because it can be a little bit blunt and rude, especially if someone, cares a lot about what they're talking about, but you just want them to get to the point. You just have to say, cut to the chase now. When you want to say that someone has thought of all the details of something and they haven't forgotten anything, you can say that they thought of the whole 9 yards. Now, this is a very strange phrase because in the United States, we usually use measurements of 10, but I guess in this phrase, we're saying the whole 9 yards, and pretty much all native speakers would know what you're talking about when you use this phrase. People in the United States go all out planning weddings sometimes. So they think of where they want to have the wedding, what it will look like, what food they'll serve the guests, what desserts there'll be, the whole 9 yards. This just means they think of all the details. Speaking of weddings, they can really cost an arm and a leg. Now, this is a very old classic idiom, but it's still very common to use today. If you say that something costs an arm and a leg, it means it's very, very expensive. A wedding can cost an arm and a leg. Now, I'm an English teacher, but if you ask me, do British people say this phrase a lot? I will tell you, you are barking up the wrong tree. This phrase, to bark up the wrong tree, it means that you're pursuing the wrong thing. You have made a mistake in thinking that I would know what British people commonly say, but I've never been to the UK. I've only met a handful of British people in real life. In the United States, of course, I've seen many online, but I would not know what they say. So you're just barking up the wrong tree. So when you make a mistake, when you inquire with the wrong person about something, you might be barking up the wrong tree. And of course, I think this idiom comes from the idea that dogs love to chase squirrels up trees, and if they're looking at the wrong tree and the squirrel's not there, they're barking up the wrong tree. They're trying the wrong thing. The most common idiom to say that someone is sick in English is to say that they are feeling under the weather. Or you can simply just say, Kayla is under the weather today. That means that she's sick. And yes, I'm talking about myself in third person here. There are, of course, other idioms to say that someone is sick, but this is the main one that I want you to remember. And it's a very kind way to say that someone's sick without giving too many details. And typically, we only use this phrase if someone is just going to be sick for 1 or 2 days. They just have a small flu or a small cold. Now, if someone is very sick, maybe they have cancer or another disease, you would not use this idiom under the weather. You would just say, they have a disease or they have an illness. If you want to say that something is very common and easy to come by, you can describe it as a dime a dozen. I think of this idiom describing cards. So people collect baseball cards, football cards, and Pokemon cards. There's all sorts of cards that people collect. And the idea to collecting these cards is you buy a pack and you open it and you hope to get some rare card, but typically you just get the common cards that are a dime a dozen. So this is the idea that you could just buy these cards, a dozen of them, 12, for a dime, which is very inexpensive. So if you want to say that something is just generally very common, very cheap, very easy to find, you can say it's a dime a dozen. Now, this idiom is very commonly heard in the United States, especially on television shows and in movies, but I don't personally say it a lot, so you should know what it is because you'll hear it frequently. The idiom is cat got your tongue. If you want to question why someone is being silent or Maybe you think that they don't have a response because they're feeling sort of guilty. You can say, cat got your tongue. And this is a very sassy way of saying, like, why aren't you speaking? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel bad? So I think this is why you'll hear this on a lot of television shows and movies, because people are being very dramatic in these situations. If you need to say that there has to be two people involved to either solve a problem or cause a problem, you can say it takes two to tango. And the tango, of course, is a very popular dance that takes two people to do. And we use this idiom to say, it takes two people to do something. So I have two children, and if they are doing something and they're kind of getting in trouble, maybe one says it wasn't me, I'll say, takes two to tango. This means that it takes two of you to get in trouble together. You are both guilty. So you could also say this to someone if you need their help. If you need the assistance of another person, you can say, well, it takes two to tango. Get over here and help me. It's kind of a funny phrase, and it's used definitely more casually. If you are very tough and you like working out and exercising in the gym, I think that you'll like this next idiom or very common phrase. The phrase is no pain, no gain. So quite literally, when you're exercising, of course you're going to be sore after exercising very hard. Maybe you lifted really heavy weights and your muscles need a few days to recover. If you're sore and you have pain, you're probably going to gain a lot of muscle. Now, this idiom can also be used in situations where it just takes really hard work to do something. Like maybe you are taking a long time to finish a paper for school. You're working very hard, it's kind of unpleasant, but no pain, no gain. So that means if you don't work hard and make sacrifices, you're not going to have gains or, successes. When you want to say that someone needs to confront a fear by doing something that they're scared of, you should tell them to take the bull by the horns. Now, this is the idea that quite literally, if you're afraid of a bull, they have horns on their head and, you could grab them and try to ride the bull, but this is obviously used very figuratively, very idiomatically. Let's say you're afraid of public speaking, but you sign up for a speech class. You are really taking the bull by the horns. You're facing your fears. This next phrase is so common, I use it all of the time. When you're talking about someone and they enter the room and you were not expecting them to come into the room and you want to say, I was just talking about you. It's more common to say, speak of the devil. Now, you might see this as kind of rude, but it's just so common here to say speak of the devil. And I think the full phrase is speak of the devil and they will appear. So you're talking about this person and they come into the room unexpectedly, you can use this phrase. If you want to say that something is impossible to believe without actually seeing it for yourself, you can say the phrase seeing is believing. So I had a friend that had never been to New York City and they said, I don't think it would be that great to ride the subway each day. I don't think it would work very well. I could say to them, well, seeing is believing. Once you see it, you'll believe it, because the public transportation in New York City is much better than anywhere else in the United States. So if you go see it for yourself, you'll understand what people are talking about. Instead of just telling someone to give up on something, you can say that they should just throw in the towel. So in fighting, if the fighter is getting, too weak and you can tell that they should not be fighting anymore, your team or your coach will throw a white towel. That means you guys give up or surrender. So this phrase comes from that idea. If you give up on something, you can say, well, I'm just going to throw in the towel. When I was a kid, I really hated playing basketball at first. My first few seasons, I was really terrible. I didn't find it fun, and I just said, I want to just throw in the towel, but my mom wouldn't let me quit in the middle of the season, so I couldn't just throw in the towel. I had to keep going, but I actually ended up really liking basketball, and I played basketball for many more years after that. So I'm glad that she didn't just let me throw in the towel. If someone is being very stubborn and not changing their stance on something, or they won't change their idea very easily, then you can say that they really are putting their foot down about something. When my kids watch TV, I'll say, okay, after one episode, we're turning the TV off and I'm putting my foot down about that. That means I'm going to be very firm, very stubborn about it. There's no more asking, hey, can we watch one more episode? Because I think too much TV turns my children into, I don't know, just kind of crazy kids. So I put my foot down about that. I'm very strict about it. So in the United States, the Kansas City Chiefs just won the Super Bowl. Now, when a sports team here gets really good, they get really popular, and a lot of people start to become fans, or they jump on the bandwagon. This just means that when something becomes popular, then you become a fan of it. And typically when someone in the United States is a fan of a team only because they're doing well, we call them a bandwagon fan. That means they're not a true fan. They weren't a fan of the team when they were doing bad, only when they're doing good. And you can use this idiom to jump on the bandwagon when talking about other popular things, not just sports. If you're giving a presentation or a speech and something is happening in the crowd, but you just ignore it and you keep going, you could say that you didn't miss a beat during your speech or during your presentation. We say this to someone when they just continue on without being distracted by something. So typically we use this idiom to give a compliment like, even though there was a distraction, you didn't miss a beat, you just kept going. One of my favorite ways to say that you're going to change your direction or you're going to change your approach to something when you're having a problem is to say, wow, you really flipped the script. So let's say you are a teacher and you have a student in your class that is failing the class, they're doing really terribly, and suddenly they start studying, they start showing up to class, asking a lot of questions. You could say to that student, wow, you really flipped the script. Your grade is turning around and you're really trying now. So this idiom, to flip the script, it means to just change your approach, change your direction, or even just changing your attitude. When you talk to people who are engineers, they're very smart, they're very passionate about what they're doing, but sometimes when you talk to them, they can really just get into the weeds on the topic. And if you're not knowledgeable about their type of engineering, let's say they're a computer engineer, well, you're not going to know what they're talking about, and you're going to say, all right, you're getting a little bit into the weeds. This means you're talking about really small technical details, and I don't need to know all that because I don't understand it. So if you want to tell someone just to keep the conversation very general or, very understandable for you, you can say, hey, we don't need to get into the weeds here. If you are romantically interested in someone, we usually say that's your crush, and you're finally going to ask them out on a date or tell them that you like them, you could say you're finally going to make a move. So this idiom is used, for love and dating, but you can also just use it whenever you're going to finally do something, take some big action on something that you've been waiting to do. You're finally going to make a move. Instead of telling someone to keep something in mind, which is also kind of an idiom, a lot of people will say, bear in mind. This is one of my husband's favorite phrases. He uses it all of the time, so I have to teach it to you. If you want to tell someone a story, but you also need them to remember a detail for the story to make sense, you'll use this phrase. Let me show you. Yesterday, I took my kids outside to play in the snow. Bear in mind, it was freezing cold, so I didn't stay out there for very long. So instead of just telling you a story about playing with my kids outside in the snow, I need you to bear in mind or remember that it was very cold because it was pretty unpleasant to be outside, even though my kids did not care. They were having so much fun. When you first learn English, of course, you'll just learn basic sentences, basic verbs, basic nouns, basic greetings, but down the road, you'll need to know a ton of new idioms and advanced phrases. So this phrase, down the road, it means that later, in the future. It's very common to say, hey, down the road, you'll need to do this. That means in the future, you'll need to do this. And it's kind of like thinking about driving. Your future is down the road. Before we had iPhones, of course, we only had just regular phones, and some people just had a home phone. But once we had iPhones, it was a total game changer to our entire life. So this phrase, a game changer, it's used to describe something that either really positively impacts things or, it kind of throws a big challenge for things. It's some detail that either changes things for the good or for the bad. In the case of iPhones, you could argue that it was a positive game changer because now we can communicate so easily, but you could also say it's a negative game changer because people spend too much time on their smartphones. So use this phrase, game changer. It's a really good one. One thing that I say to myself when I feel stressed out, when I feel, just kind of sad or angry, but I need to just focus on what I'm doing, I say, get it together, Kayla. This means just, calm yourself down, relax. You need to do some work. You need to get things done. So you need to be careful using this phrase with other people, because people can be very fragile in their emotions, and you need to, of course, be like, are you okay? But when someone needs to just focus, get their work done, even though they're sad or stressed out, you could say, hey, you need to get it together. This means, figure out your emotions, try to calm down. If you want to say that something happened quicker than you expected or it happened, very fast, you could say before you knew it or before you know it. So I always thought it would take so long to become a teacher, but before you knew it, I had my own classroom and I had my own students. And then before I knew it, I was an online English teacher. So life just moves really fast. It means that even though things can feel like a long time, the time passes quickly and before you know it, you're old. It's really important when you're making a deal with someone, especially if the deal seems really good for you, to ask, what's the catch? Or you could say, there has to be a catch. So in this case, when we say there's a catch, it means there's something that's unexpected that will actually make the deal very difficult or very bad for you. And it's usually something that's very hidden. So sometimes in the United States, you'll see very good deals advertised for brand new cars. But the catch is that you're going to have to pay a lot of interest on your car payments. So the car is actually going to cost a lot more than you expect. There's always a catch when a deal seems too good. That means there's always something hidden that you will have to do that makes it challenging. My favorite idiom to say that two people or two things go along very well together is to say they're like two peas in a pod. And this is typically used just for people. If you think that, your friends who are boyfriend and girlfriend they work very well together. They're good friends. They're good in their relationship. You could say, you two are just two peas in a pod. It's just a very cute phrase that means you go along together very well. One thing that's really common on American television is home remodeling. So they take somebody's house or a room in their house that's pretty ugly, pretty basic, and they actually transform it into a beautiful new room. Now they show the new room to the person who owns the house, and the person always says, I can't believe my eyes. Or, they're just saying, I cannot believe it because it's so great. And also you could use this phrase if something was really bad. I can't believe my eyes, how bad it is. If you want to say this phrase to someone else, you'll say, can you believe your eyes? That means it's either really good or really bad. Of course, there's a lot of context to this phrase that's needed, but it's very common to say when something is, astonishing. You can't believe it. The next two phrases are very common to say that you have two difficult choices and you don't even really want to choose between the two, but you have to choose. So the first phrase is to say, I'm between a rock and a hard place. And the second phrase is, I have to choose between two evils. These are both very common phrases to use when you have to make a choice, but you don't really want to choose either option. So maybe your mother and your girlfriend both want to spend time with you. And if you say no to your mom, you're going to disappoint your girlfriend. And if you say no to your girlfriend, you're going to disappoint your mom. So you could say, I'm between a rock and a hard place. Now, you wouldn't really say I have to choose between two evils because in this case, both choices are okay, but you're just going to disappoint someone. If you have two bad choices that, are going to have bad implications for people, you have to say, I have to choose between two evils. When you want to say that someone is telling a story but not giving you a lot of detail, you can say, wow, you're leaving a lot to the imagination here. This means you're not giving enough detail and I'm just imagining a lot of crazy things. Now, if someone is giving you too much detail, You can either say that's TMI, or too much information, or you could say that's not leaving much to the imagination here. So it just means that you're giving way too much personal information about the situation. So a lot of times when people are telling really long stories, instead of saying, the ending, they'll just say, well, and the rest is history. This means that you can kind of guess what's going to happen in the story because, it's so well known. For instance, in Cinderella, the prince and Cinderella get married, and the rest is history. That means they just went on to live happy lives. I'm not going to tell you the rest of their lives because that would be a long and just boring story. So you hear this at the end of stories or the end of movies in the United States. The rest is history. That means you can pretty much guess what happened. So in the United States, there was actually a show for a while about an Asian American family. They had immigrated to the United States, and the show was called Fresh Off the Boat. Now, I feel like this could be pretty insulting to say to someone like, oh, you're fresh off the boat. But I've heard people who have immigrated to the United States say this in a joking manner, like, oh, I was fresh off the boat. This just means I had just come to the United States or come to wherever, and I hadn't acclimated yet. I hadn't gotten used to everything yet. I hadn't learned the language. And of course, this phrase is not so literal. People are not actually coming to the United States on boats very frequently anymore. Most people fly. But it's just kind of a funny, joking phrase that's used to say, I came here and I was not used to everything yet. I was very fresh off the boat. If you want to tell someone that something is impossible and not worth doing, you can say, don't even bother. It just means that something is just going to be too challenging or not worth the effort. So if you think that you need to learn every single word in the English language, don't even bother because there's always going to be new words and there's so many words that even native speakers don't know. So don't even bother. When you have a to-do list for the day, you probably want to just finish it quick and knock it out. When you say that, you knocked out a task, that means you just finished it quickly and got it done. So usually in the morning, I knock out getting my bed made, I knock out unloading the dishwasher, I try to knock out the annoying things that I don't want to do later. So oftentimes in the United States, businesses will say, how did you hear about us? How did you hear to come to our store? Or how did you hear about our service? And, they'll say, did you hear about us on a commercial? Did you hear about us on social media? And you could say, no, just word of mouth. This means that maybe you heard someone talking about them or a friend told you about the store or about the service. So the phrase word of mouth means you didn't hear it anywhere officially or written, just someone told you. This phrase can be kind of confusing when you hear it for the first time. When someone says it's go time, it just means it's time to start. Let's get ready, let's be motivated, it's go time. And this phrase is especially used in movies, when, at the end they have a big plan, maybe they're going to do something or rescue someone, and everybody's ready, they'll say, okay, it's go time, let's go. When you ask someone a question and, they know the answer and you want to ask them a follow-up question, it's kind of like, you're testing their knowledge. It might not be an official test. It might not be a teacher saying this. We say, oh, do you know this too? Bonus points if you can answer this question. Bonus points just means like, you don't have to know this, but it would be cool if you did. It's really a common thing to say. It's common in actual game shows and actual trivia competitions, but we also just say it in our normal everyday conversations. Bonus points if you know where that was made. It's just kind of saying, this is a fun fact. It's not absolutely necessary to know. A funny phrase that I hear quite commonly is to say that someone had white knuckles. So if someone is afraid, especially if they're on a roller coaster or if they're in a fast car, they might be gripping onto their seat or gripping onto their chair and they might be white knuckling. So we use this as a verb. It just means they're holding on very tight because they are afraid that they're going to fly off or crash in the car. One thing that I really take pride in my life is a clean house. I always try to have everything clean and tidy so that, it just doesn't feel cluttered or disorganized. But it's a lot of work cleaning your own house and keeping it clean. So sometimes I have to swallow my pride and I have to ask for help around the house. I ask my kids to pick up after themselves. I ask my husband to help me with certain tasks. I feel like it's my pride, but I have to ask for help because I can't do it all myself. And I feel like this phrase, to swallow your pride, is very common, and you should also be very aware of what it means. When you're learning a language, sometimes you feel like, I don't want to ask what this means, but you have to swallow your pride and ask so that you can learn the phrase or learn the new word and you can understand what's being said. But it can be kind of embarrassing or hard to ask for help sometimes, but it's important just to swallow your pride, say, it's okay if I don't know, and ask for help. When a situation is starting to become chaotic, you can say it's going off the rails. Think of this as a train that, is about to just break. It goes off the rails. It's called derailing. But if you want to just talk about a situation in life that's starting to get chaotic or crazy, you could say this is going off the rails. When someone asks you a question like, could I use your pen in English, you can respond politely by saying yes, or of course, or certainly, or you can use this next idiom. You could say, by all means. This idiom is just used to give someone permission in a very polite way. By all means, yes, of course. So it's not, it's not necessary to always say this phrase, but it's just polite, and you'll hear it commonly to say, of course, yes, you can do it. You have permission. There are two types of people in this world, in my opinion. There are those that when they travel, they bring everything except for the kitchen sink. And there are those that travel light. So these are both idioms, but the idiom that I'm going to teach you is to travel light. When someone travels light, it means they only bring essential things. They don't pack too many clothes, or they don't pack unnecessary things. So people who travel light, they often only have one backpack to hold when they go on an airplane. But people who bring everything on a trip, they probably have a really big suitcase, a backpack, a purse, a lot of different things. So I personally try to travel light, but it isn't always easy. This next phrase is used pretty sarcastically in English. So if you want to tell someone that they're thinking too highly of another person, you can say it's like you worship the ground that they walk on. So you're saying, this person isn't that great. You're like worshiping. You're thinking they're like a god. And of course, this phrase is not literal. It's just an idiom, but it's used to say, you think highly of someone. Or if you're a big fan of, let's say, Lady Gaga, you could say, I worship the ground that Lady Gaga walks on. And of course, this is a very dramatic way to use the phrase, but you get the idea. In the United States, there is an actual baseball Hall of Fame. It's a place you can go in Cooperstown, and you can go and see pictures of really great baseball players and all sorts of artifacts like baseball bats and baseballs. It's called the Hall of Fame. It's used to display the best players in the sport. So this phrase is used in other situations besides literal halls of fame. It's used to just say that something is really good or it's the best. Another phrase that's really great to use when you want to describe something that is excellent or it's the best is to say it's world class. So in the United States, Chicago is known as a world-class city. They have some of the best restaurants, they have some of the best museums, and they have some of the best sports teams. So it's known as a world-class city. In a lot of different countries, you might say we have world-class whatever it is, a certain type of food, a certain type of dessert, or a certain type of university, whatever it may be. The last few idioms in this English lesson are kind of gambling, cards, money related. The first one is to hit the jackpot. If you say that you hit the jackpot, it means that something very lucky happened to you. Something very big happened to you as well. If you married someone very good, you could say, I really hit the jackpot with my wife or with my husband. If you want to say that someone is risking everything for something, you can say they bet the house. This phrase means you use all your money to bet on something because you're pretty sure it's going to happen. A similar phrase is to say, I'm going to bank on it. And I use this phrase all the time. If you are going to go outside all day, you can say, I am banking on it being very nice weather today. That means you're pretty sure it's not going to rain, it's not going to be cloudy. You're banking on nice weather. You're very sure it's going to happen and you're relying on it. And if you want to say that something is going to probably happen, you can say, I think it's in the cards. Now, in the opposite way, you can say, this is not in the cards for today. So if someone says, hey, do you think that we can go out to dinner tonight? You could say, I'm really tired. I just don't think it's in the cards for me today. That means it's probably not going to happen.
So you may have learned the word strong or durable when you were learning English, but oftentimes native English speakers will use this next phrase, heavy duty.
This is heavy duty, Doc. This is great.
Now let's say you got yourself a new pair of boots. You could say, these boots are very durable. You could say that. You will often hear native English speakers using that word durable. It's quite formal. What you'll hear instead is, I got a new pair of heavy duty boots. So you could say the boots are heavy duty, or you can just use it as an adjective, heavy duty boots. Or you could say, I got a heavy duty jacket. Or you could say, wow, that is a really heavy duty pair of pants. Maybe it's a pair of pants that's very thick, that, will protect you if you are working at a construction site or if you're going to a very cold environment. When you get things that are meant to be very durable, which means they can withstand really harsh conditions like ice, snow, they can withstand wind, or they could withstand, a child trying to break it, you can describe it as heavy duty. If you buy something that's very cheap and you think it might break pretty easily, you could say, be careful, that's not very heavy duty, which means it could break easily. A really formal word in English is acceptable, which you will hear from time to time, which means occasionally. But native English speakers will often just say, that's good enough.
Good enough.
And you may have wondered, what exactly does that mean? Why are we saying that so much? If someone says something is good enough, it doesn't mean it's actually really good. It doesn't mean it's bad. But it just means it's acceptable. It will pass. Maybe if you were ever in college or university and the teacher says, can anyone tell me the answer to this question? And you raise your hand and you say, yeah, here's the answer. The teacher will say, yeah, that's a good enough answer, but I will explain it a bit more. Meaning your answer was correct, it's acceptable, but I'll go beyond what you just said to give a more thorough explanation. You can describe the quality of something as good enough. I got a car and it's good enough to get me from what we say point A to point B, which means 2 locations. There's another bonus phrase for you. If you want to say 2 locations, you can say point A and point B. So if your car is just good enough, it means it's not a Ferrari, it's not a Corvette, it might not even be a brand new car, but it's reliable. It can get you to where you need to go. It's good enough. Hopefully, when you were about to get married, if you're married, you were not thinking about if it was the right decision, even after you committed to getting married. In English, we have a phrase for this. We can say, hopefully you are not having second thoughts.
Any second thoughts?
So if someone has second thoughts about something, they're reconsidering their decision. Nowadays, it seems like everyone likes to make videos to post on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, just any sort of social media. And a lot of people post videos in order to make money, like a business. Some people do it just for fun. So the phrase is just for fun.
For fun. For fun?
Which means it's not serious, it's not official, you're doing it not to win something, just literally to have fun. So maybe your friend says, hey, do you want to play poker? Which is a card game, usually gambling involved. And you say, no, I don't really have any money. Your friend might say, well, we could just play for fun. This means we're not playing for money. It's not official. We are just playing to have a game, to have fun. Instead of just saying that something is of high quality, Americans will often say something is top-notch, which means high quality, the best.
Top-notch.
Maybe you've been to a really, really good restaurant that is famous for its food. You could describe that restaurant as top-notch. Or you can just give a compliment to someone trying to say, you kind of make the best food. Say your food is top-notch. Or my teacher is top-notch. You can describe a lot of different things as top-notch if you want to say it is the best or the best quality. If you want to say that something is more relaxed, it's not trying to have a lot of attention or be flashy, you can describe it using the slang phrase in English as low key.
It's very low key.
We're having a party on Friday night, but it's not going to be a big deal. It's going to be pretty low key. When I got married, I had a party after, but it wasn't like a huge expensive wedding. It was very low key. You can just say you're a low key person in general. It just means you're relaxed. You'll hear American English speakers use this phrase all the time. Something is low key. It just means it's relaxed. You don't have to worry about dressing up or anything if something is low key. A really good phrase that means that something is super unusual, eccentric, if you know what that word is, or just not really the way that people usually do things, is you can describe it as off the wall. Sometimes this phrase can also be used not to just say that something is kind of strange, but, it's kind of bad. If you're talking about a coworker, maybe they had an idea in the meeting and the idea was really bad and you're not really sure why they said it. You could say, that idea was just really off the wall. It just means it didn't make sense. I don't know why they said it. Off the wall. Now, almost the exact opposite of calling something off the wall is to say that something is very run-of-the-mill.
Run-of-the-mill, average worker.
So the phrase is run-of-the-mill. It means that something is conventional or ordinary, or if someone does something that's very run-of-the-mill, it means they do it the way that it's always been done. So this phrase, again, I'll break it apart, run-of-the-mill. It's fun to say very quickly, and I feel like that's how Americans typically use it in a conversation. They say, wow, that's really run-of-the-mill. Maybe you went to a movie and you thought it was just an ordinary romantic comedy movie. You could say, well, the script or the story to that movie was pretty run-of-the-mill, meaning ordinary, average, traditional. Oftentimes, instead of just saying something is expensive in English, you'll hear people say it's high-end. High-end does basically mean that something is expensive, but it can also mean luxurious as well. For instance, if you are going to rent apartments in the United States, you can get just a normal apartment or you can get a very high-end apartment, which means it's expensive rent, it's very nice building, maybe you're by some really expensive shopping stores and things like that. So we use this phrase high-end because I feel like Americans don't necessarily like to say it's expensive and brag. They'll say, oh, it's very high-end, which means the same as expensive, but without saying, it's worth a lot of money. If you've ever seen someone react to something in a very exaggerated or dramatic way, you can describe their reaction in English as over the top.
Little over the top, guys.
Sometimes when people are going to propose in the United States, maybe the man is going to say, will you marry me? Sometimes the woman really knows that he is going to propose. It's not a surprise, but they like to have an over-the-top reaction. Maybe they're crying and they're saying, I can't believe it. I didn't know. This is such a surprise. They're acting very over the top. This means just super dramatic. And it's generally a negative thing to say that someone was being over the top about something. They can also be, too upset about something, more upset than the situation actually calls for, or, more excited, or they can have a bigger reaction just to be dramatic and gain a lot of attention. So if you're describing someone's actions or reactions as over the top, you're just saying it's too much. An insulting phrase in English to use is to call someone a deadbeat.
You big deadbeat.
Oftentimes, if there is a dad that doesn't take care of their children, they're not involved in the child's life, or they're not providing money for the child, people will say as an insult, they are a deadbeat dad. This is extremely insulting. And just in general, if someone is not working and they are able to work and you think they're being lazy and unproductive, you could call them a deadbeat, or you might hear someone call someone else a deadbeat. Be really careful with this phrase. It is super insulting. It's a very bad thing to call someone a deadbeat, but sometimes the situation warrants it, and you need to know what it means. A really nice phrase to compliment someone is to say that they are next level.
This is next level.
So maybe you work with someone and every time they give a presentation, their presentation skills are great. Their slide deck is really, really professional. They take questions from everyone in the room and have really good answers. You could say your speaking skills or your presentation skills are next level. This is just a way to compliment them, saying like better than anyone else. You're on the next level of your skills. Or if you have a food that is extremely delicious, you could use this phrase as well. You could say, oh, that cookie is next level. Your cooking is next level. This movie was next level. It's just saying something was really extremely good. Another really common way that we say that something is very relaxed in the United States is we can say it is laid back. So just to casually tell someone, hey, like we're having a party next week, it's going to be really laid back, or we're just going to hang out later, nothing too official, we're going to be laid back. This just means nice and relaxed, nothing formal. If you want to describe someone who never really gets stressed out, they're always pretty pleasant and relaxed to be around, you could say they're a really laid back person. One phrase that I really like to use to say that something is strong, solid, and reliable is to say it's rock solid.
Our marriage is rock solid.
We often say if we have a really good friendship with someone, that their friendship with them is rock solid. They're a rock solid friend. It just means they're very reliable. They never lie. They never do things to hurt you. They're a great friend if you describe them as rock solid. You can also just describe something that's very strong physically. Like you could say this table will never break. It is rock solid. Even if it's made of wood, it's not made of rock. You're just using this as an adjective to say strong, rock solid. If you want to say that you are very excited about something, you can say you are hyped for it. A lot of times people are hyped to go to a Taylor Swift concert. They're so excited. It's going to be the best concert of their entire lives. The atmosphere is completely hyped. This just means enthusiastic and very excited. You can think of hyped as almost an abbreviated word for hyper. Again, this is a very slang phrase. You could say, oh, I'm really hyped for Christmas. This means you're very excited for it. You're awaiting the event. If you want to say that someone is lacking decisive decisions, they're always kind of changing their mind, they can't decide on something, you could describe them as wishy-washy.
I hate that. It's so wishy-washy.
You might say, oh, my boss is so wishy-washy. They can never decide on exactly how they want something done. Or you could even describe weather as wishy-washy. It's cloudy outside, but it hasn't really rained yet, so I'm not really sure what the weather is going to be like today. It's wishy-washy. It's generally pretty negative to call someone wishy-washy. You're saying they can't make up their mind. They can't make a clear decision to help you out. A lot of my English learners ask me what this next phrase means. When we describe something as cheesy, we're generally saying it's tacky and over-sentimental. For instance, you might post a picture of you and your husband or you and your wife on your Facebook or wherever it might be on social media, and you might say, oh, I love this person so much. They mean so much to me. Sorry for this cheesy post. This just means like you're sharing way too many feelings for social media. Now, cheesy can also mean, it's kind of bad. It doesn't seem sincere, but we can also use cheesy in this way that just says it's too emotional. I like cheesy movies. I like The Notebook, for instance. I think it's good to have a release of emotions while watching movies sometimes.
So cheesy?
This next word is a little bit outdated, but you definitely will still hear it used from time to time. And you can even try it out as well. I wouldn't say it's so outdated where you can't use it. The word is spiffy.
Ooh, very spiffy. That's a lovely dress.
If you want to say that someone looks spiffy, it means they are neatly dressed and they look really nice. You might say, look at these spiffy new shoes I just got. This means you think your shoes are new, they're clean, and you think that they're stylish. So it's a compliment to use this word, spiffy. I definitely feel like I hear British speakers say this word all the time, but you could use it in American English as well. The word is bonkers.
It's gonna be bonkers.
If you said that the crowd went bonkers after your favorite soccer team scored, it means everyone went crazy and loud. Bonkers is just a slang word for crazy. Ugh, you drive me bonkers. This means you drive me crazy. It's a negative phrase, like you're very annoying. But again, I feel like British speakers use this a bit more than Americans, but you'll hear it in both English speaking conversations. When I was younger, this word was definitely more popular, but people my age will still say this all the time. You can say that something is legit. So legit is slang for legitimate, but we use it in a bit of a different way when we say, oh, that's legit. It generally means that something is very good and authentic. The food at that restaurant was legit. This means that it was very good. It was legitimately food. No, it means it was very good food. So usually in English, when someone says that is so legit, it means it's very good. It's a slang word. And it's generally not used by much younger people anymore. More people my age and older. Edgy. When you describe something as edgy, it means it's very bold and unconventional, often pushing the boundaries of what's okay, what's acceptable, and what's appropriate. The most common way we describe someone or something as edgy is artwork. So, maybe an artist is trying to make people talk about their artwork, so they'll make something very edgy that almost seems kind of inappropriate, even though it's technically maybe not, but it's on the edge of being inappropriate or what people find to not be okay. It's edgy. Here's another adjective that's a bit dated, but again, that I use this word once in a while, and you'll hear it on American television, movies. You'll hear older people use it for sure. The word is snazzy.
Pretty snazzy, eh?
If something is stylish or fancy, we can say, ooh, those look snazzy. So again, you could say those shoes are snazzy. That car that you just bought is really snazzy. It just means it's very stylish. This next term is definitely very negative to describe someone as, so be careful with it, but you need to know what it means. If you describe someone as flaky, it means they are unreliable.
Although, hopefully not flaky.
Everyone has a flaky friend. I swear, I don't know why. It's just the way the world works. The flaky friend that you have will be the type of person that says, they can help you move one weekend, but then an hour before they're supposed to come and help, they call and say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot my dog had a veterinarian appointment, or, oh, I'm sorry, my car's not working. And maybe their excuse is legitimate. Maybe it's a real excuse, but oftentimes they just don't actually help when the time comes, or maybe they'll cancel on you a lot when you're supposed to hang out. So that's what we describe as someone who is flaky. It's important that you know what it means when someone says that something or someone is trashy in English.
Wow, that was trashy.
So you can say that something is trashy when it's low quality or inappropriate or, just kind of bad in general. If you describe a person as trashy, maybe they burp a lot and they don't say excuse me, or maybe they just dress with clothes that are super dirty or saying something inappropriate. That's the way that we use trashy in English. Or if you are at a store and you describe a piece of clothing as trashy, you mean that it looks cheap. It doesn't look very good at all. Quite the opposite of saying that something is trashy is to say that something is bougie. Bougie is an absolute English slang word. It's very fun to get to use. If you're saying something is bougie, you can mean that it's pretentious or it's very high class, very fancy. If a restaurant has white tablecloths, candles, the waiter and waitresses are dressed up very nicely, the food is very expensive, you could say that restaurant is so bougie. Or if your friend buys a very expensive purse, you could say, wow, that is a bougie purse. You're just implying that it's very high class and fancy. Have you ever heard in English someone say that a person is bloated? This means that the person is very wealthy and rich, and usually we use this in extreme cases. For instance, Warren Buffett is bloated. That means he has a ton of money. If you drive a Ferrari, you must be loaded, or you have a lot of debt. If you want to say that someone is being super dishonest and you can't really trust them, you can describe them as shady.
That Tomas is shady.
A lot of times when you're looking for jobs, you'll just apply to anything that looks somewhat appealing. And once in a while, someone will call you back and they'll claim, they have this job for you that seems too good to be true. And you're thinking, this seems a little bit shady. It means that it doesn't seem like a real job. It doesn't seem like the person's being honest. Maybe they want you to sell a product that's not a very good product. That would be a super shady job. If you describe a person as shady, it means they are untrustworthy. This next word in English can be perceived as being a little bit inappropriate, so be super careful how you use it. If you describe someone's actions as being ballsy, it means they are very bold and courageous. Again, be a bit careful when using this word. It's definitely slang. It's definitely a bit inappropriate to say that someone or something was very ballsy. For instance, if you have a coworker and they say to your boss, I think your plan seems like it really isn't going to work. It does not seem like a good plan at all. You could say, wow, that was really ballsy to tell them that, meaning they were being very bold and courageous by standing up to your boss and saying their plan wasn't good.
Yes, she's emotional, but ballsy.
If you would like to learn a slang word that means that something is a bit risky, you can say that a situation is dicey.
Marriage is a dicey thing at best.
Now, we think of dice as being associated with games, and often when you play games like card games or casino games, you're gambling. You're rolling the dice to see if you can get the correct number. So think of this and think about you're risking your money. If you're risking something in a situation, you can say a situation is dicey. Maybe you're traveling and you're unsure if you're going to be able to make a connecting flight. A connecting flight is when you fly to one city, stop in order to fly to your final destination. So you have two different airplane rides. If you're not sure if you're going to be able to run to your flight and connect to your flight, you can say, it's a little bit dicey if we're going to make it on the airplane in time. This just means it's risky, it's uncertain.
So nowadays, young teenagers or just, young adults, they're always talking about the chat. So when someone is streaming online, they're going live, usually there is a public chat that people start talking in. Now, one thing that more adults have been saying is blank has entered the chat.
No sooner had Rick 9 Plus entered the chat room.
So maybe after a long week, you can say, relaxation has finally entered the chat. When you're using this phrase, you're just saying something has finally arrived unexpectedly or after a long time. Maybe your friend is saying, I'm on a really strict diet. I'm eating very healthy right now. But you just bought them some ice cream. You'll say, ice cream has entered the chat. This means even though they weren't expecting to eat a treat, you unexpectedly brought them this surprise ice cream. This is definitely a really fun phrase that you'll hear, especially on the internet if you're watching videos or social media posts. This next phrase has been around for a pretty long time, and I've been saying it for a long time, but I've noticed recently that it has increased in its popularity and its uses, and people are even using it in more and more different ways. So when you say that something has popped off,
Once you finally pop off,
it means that it's done really well. So nowadays I'll hear younger people say, my outfit really popped off last night. This means that everybody complimented the clothes that they were wearing. They felt really good. They felt like they looked really good. This is a newer use of the word. I typically use this word when something is scoring a lot of points. For instance, if I'm watching a sporting event and my favorite team scores a lot, I'll say, wow, my team really popped off in this game. Or if one player in particular scored a lot of goals, I'll say, well, they really popped off. You could even use this in a business or financial sense. You could say, our sales numbers have really popped off this quarter. It's kind of slang, but it's so common that even older people will understand this phrase and maybe even will use this phrase as well. If you want to say that something has done really well, you can say it popped off. Now, I promised you 10 phrases in this video that English learners will typically not know even if they're very advanced. And this next phrase is not slang, but it is one of those that's Really tricky for English learners to use, so we're going to master it right now together. The phrase is by and large.
By and large.
Now, these three words grammatically don't make a lot of sense together, but as the phrase, native English speakers know exactly what you mean when you say something by and large. When we're trying to say the majority or generally or typically, we use this phrase. So by and large, people like sunny, warm weather. This means the majority of people like this type of weather. If you're trying to make a point or an argument, this phrase can be really useful to say something is in general more popular or more liked. Maybe your friend is trying to argue that the best sport in the world is cricket, and you think the best sport in the world is soccer. You can say, by and large, more people in the world play soccer. And this is just making a generalization, or you're saying it's more popular, more liked. Again, we can use this phrase as saying the majority. So by and large, our day was really successful. We just had a few minor setbacks. So you're saying the majority of the day, by and large, the day was successful. And then you're saying except for a few setbacks. So you wouldn't use this phrase to say your whole day was good, but if you want to say the majority of the day was good, and then say besides or but a few setbacks. This is how you use the phrase by and large. If you are an avid X user, formerly known as Twitter, you may have seen someone tweet this phrase, hard stop. So a hard stop typically means we have a deadline, a time that we have to stop and move on to the next thing or the next activity, or you have an appointment and you have to stop at that time or you will be late. So this is typically how the phrase is used and more traditionally how the phrase is used. But nowadays, again, I see people on social media say an opinion and then say hard stop. So someone might say Coke is better than Pepsi, hard stop. This means that there's no argument. Please don't even respond. It's a hard stop. I don't want to hear any more. So this phrase will be really useful if you are on social media or if you're just in the business or workplace or have a meeting with someone and you have to stop this meeting at a certain time. Otherwise, you will not be able to meet your other obligations or go to your next appointment. You could say, we have a hard stop at 12:30. And this just lets the person know, you have the limited amount of time, and it's more polite than just interrupting at 12:30 and saying, I have to go. You're warning them in advance. When you want to say that something was unsuccessful, kind of a failure, or it just really didn't meet the expectations, we say it was a flop.
It was a total flop.
So this is definitely a slang phrase, but again, very common amongst younger people and older people. Oftentimes when people are really excited about a new movie coming out, maybe they're saying, oh, I'm excited for the new Star Wars movie, the new Transformers movie, or the new Avengers movie, movies that people get really excited about. If it is a disappointing movie when people actually see it, they'll say it was a total flop. So when I cook dinner for my family, I'll get excited about making something, especially if I try out a new recipe, and if it doesn't turn out very good, it's a flop. So if you want to say that something just didn't meet the expectations and it didn't work, it was a flop. Did you know in English we have a phrase to explain the amount of time that someone can focus on something? Maybe you've heard of this phrase before. The phrase is attention span.
Kids don't have any attention span.
So young children do not have a big attention span, meaning they can only watch something or look at something for a few minutes before they get bored and move on to the next thing. Now, in theory, adults have a really long attention span. We can sit down and read a book, especially if it's an interesting book, but some people say social media is ruining our attention spans. It's making us not be able to focus on things for a long time before we get bored, because we can just pull out our phone and look at things, scroll through apps and social media. So you'll have to let me know in the comments, has your attention span gotten shorter as you've watched more social media, or do you think it doesn't actually affect your attention span? Let me know your opinion in the comments. This next phrase is really useful. I find myself using it a lot. If you want to say that you just remembered something because someone brought up the subject, or they started talking about the thing and then it helped your brain remember something, you can use the phrase, now that you mention it.
Now that you mention it.
Someone might say, I'm thinking about going to get lunch. And you might say, now that you mention it, I'm pretty hungry too. This means you weren't thinking about your hunger. It wasn't something that, had your attention at the moment. But now that the person is talking about food and going to get lunch, now that you mention it, I am hungry too. And this would be a way of telling the person, I should get lunch with you. Maybe you're talking about a party or a wedding or something, and, there's so many people at the party. Maybe you didn't talk to everyone individually, but you were at the party, and the next day your friend says, hey, did you see Jenny at the party last night? And you might say, now that you mention it, I saw her, but I didn't get to talk to her. So this just means, helps you remember that you actually saw her at the party. Or you could say, oh, now that you mention it, she wasn't at the party. You didn't notice last night because there were so many people. But now that the person has brought it to your attention or mentioned it, you remember she wasn't there. And so you call your friend Jenny and you say, hey, why weren't you at the party last night? Now that you mention it. This is a very useful phrase. Many people learn English just by watching television, listening to music, and maybe even watching YouTube videos. This goes to show,
gentlemen,
that you don't need a fancy English class just to become proficient in English. Did you hear the phrase in this sentence here? This goes to show. So we use this phrase just to kind of summarize our words and just to make a point. So this phrase can be really useful when you're speaking to other people. You can often use this phrase when you learn a lesson from something. Maybe you had a friend that got into a car accident, but they were wearing their seatbelt, so they walked away from the car accident and they had no injuries. You could say, this goes to show that seatbelts and safety is really important in the car. So you're just making a point or drawing a conclusion using this phrase. The other day, I was listening to a story about someone who grew up being a migrant farm worker in the United States, and they became an astronaut for NASA. This goes to show that no matter what your situation is, if you have hard work and determination, you can achieve any goal or dream. So this, is using an inspiring story. You're saying this guy worked really hard, and got to be an astronaut. This goes to show, so this is the lesson that you can work hard to achieve your goals. One really casual phrase that I hear people say a lot is, can't win them all.
Well, you can't win them all.
So this is just, when you have a minor setback or something that just doesn't work out, instead of getting angry, you just say, this is just a minor error, minor setback. Can't win them all. So it literally doesn't have to be a competition to use this phrase. Maybe you are at your work office and you go to the copy machine and it says that the paper is jammed, and so you'll have to come back when it's fixed. You might say, well, can't win them all. I guess I'll try again later. This just means this didn't work out. I'm moving on to the next thing and I'm not going to get upset about it. It's just a very casual phrase that Americans use a lot just to say, no big deal. Not a big deal. I'm just going to try again next time. Maybe your child has a sports game and they lose and they're a little sad and you say, well, you can't win them all. This is just a phrase meaning, play the next game. You're not going to win every single game in your life. One time my friend went on a hike in Arizona. If you don't know a lot about the state of Arizona, it's very hot. It's a desert. And they went hiking up a mountain as a tourist. And they did not bring hiking boots. And they did not bring water. So they were in their tennis shoes with no water bottle in the desert. And after the hike, they said, I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't know what I was thinking.
We use this phrase, I don't know what I was thinking, when someone does something that seems kind of stupid, basically. So obviously you wouldn't want to go hike up a mountain in a desert with no water bottle, wearing poor footwear or shoes. So you may have just, thought you could do it. It wouldn't be a big deal. And you realize afterwards, you regret this, you should have been more prepared. You don't know what you were thinking. Maybe you might hear someone talk about something very expensive they bought. Maybe they bought a brand new Corvette, which is a very expensive car. They might say, I don't know what I was thinking. This thing costs so much money and I don't even have time to drive it. So they're just regretting a decision that they made that now they think is a stupid decision with more information. We use this phrase all the time just to say, oh, we should have thought about this. I should have had more information. I should have made a better decision. Maybe you see your friend at an event that you're going to, and you might have thought to yourself, oh, we should have gone together. You may say to your friend, I don't know what I was thinking. I should have called you and we could have driven to the event together. So we can use this for very minor situations as well.
The first phrase is very common amongst English learners. The phrase is no matter what. When you want to say that you're very committed to an idea, you're very committed to doing something, you're very committed to liking something or disliking something, you can say that you will do it no matter what. So I have seen the movie The Sound of Music so many times throughout my life, maybe 100 times. I watch it a lot around the holidays. It's always on television around the holidays. So even though I've seen it 100 times, no matter what, I will still always like that movie just because it's so classic and it's so heartwarming. If you are very committed to waking up early in the morning, you can say, I will wake up at 7 a.m. no matter what. Nothing can stop you. Meaning, even if you're really tired and you stayed up too late, you are going to be very committed to waking up early. If you are very committed to a goal or a dream that you have, you can say, I will graduate from college no matter what. This means that nothing can stop you from reaching your goal of graduating from college. Even if it's challenging, even if you want to give up, you will do it no matter what. If you want to say that someone really knows what they're talking about, they're very knowledgeable, they've studied something for a long time, you can say, you really know what you're talking about. Now, this is an informal compliment, so don't use it in a super formal context, but if you're just impressed by someone's knowledge, you can use this phrase. So ophthalmologists, they really know what they're talking about when it comes to eyes. Ophthalmologist, that word in English, it means an eye doctor, someone who has studied the eye, who does eye surgery, who can help you with any sort of medical eye problem. So of course, they really know what they're talking about when it comes to eyes. If you want to reassure someone that someone else is knowledgeable, you can say they really know what they're talking about. If you've ever had a friend talk about a movie or a TV show that you haven't seen, and they just talk about how good it is, and you say, yeah, you've got me there. I really need to see it. This phrase, you've got me there, it means they have a very valid point. And this phrase is used when they're saying something that you should do, or they're saying you're kind of wrong on that. You can say, yeah, you've got me there. So if you use this phrase, you're just admitting that they have a good point or a good idea, or they're giving you good advice that you should do. So your friend might be saying, you haven't seen Game of Thrones? It's such a good show. Everybody watched it. I can't believe that you missed it. And you can say, well, you've got me there. Maybe I should watch it. If you want to tell someone that they have good style, meaning they dress really well, or they make really good choices when it comes to music or food or style of their house, you can use this phrase, they have good taste. Someone's taste can mean, what they're eating, but it can also mean their preferences, what they like. It's the same exact thing as saying their style. A funny way to use this phrase is if you see someone in public and they're dressed in the same way as you, or you guys happen to be wearing the same shirt or the same shoes, you can say, oh, I like your shoes. You have good taste. And they might laugh because they realize that you are matching or you have the same thing. Maybe you know someone who always has a good movie or always has a good television show or always has good music to recommend to you. You can say, I always ask you for your recommendations because you have good taste or you have great taste. This means that you like their opinions of music, movies, and television shows. One phrase that's incredibly popular in television shows, movies, and especially in books is in the blink of an eye. When you say in the blink of an eye, it usually means that something changes from one thing to another in a really fast way, or it just feels like it happened so fast. So if you're not careful when you're walking near traffic, in the blink of an eye, you could get very hurt. Of course, you have to be careful when you're crossing the street and things and look up, Or if you're texting while driving, in the blink of an eye, you can get in an accident. This means you should pay attention to the road because an accident can happen so fast if you look down at your phone while you're driving, which you should never do, of course. You can also use this phrase in a positive way. So if something happened really fast that was good to you, you could say, in the blink of an eye, I was promoted to manager after working at my company for only a few months. So even though a few months' time wouldn't be considered a short amount of time normally, it might feel short because you promoted so quickly to manager. You'll hear this phrase a lot in the media, so keep an eye out for it. This next English phrase is very useful. You can use it in kind of two ways here. The first way you can use it, you can say you are going to drop a bomb on someone. And of course, this is an idiomatic expression, so there is no literal bomb or explosive being dropped. But your words that you are saying to someone are going to be so heavy, or they're going to, be very sad or very dramatic news that it's like dropping a bomb on someone. One example that comes to mind is if you've ever traveled internationally, you have to make sure to bring your passport. And maybe you're traveling with a group of friends and you get to the airport and you realize you forgot your passport, and now you have to tell your friends. You might say, well, I'm sorry to drop a bomb on you guys, but I forgot my passport. So this would be terrible news because now the trip might be ruined. You might not be able to go get your passport in time to make it to your airplane or your flight. Another way that you can use this phrase is you can say you're going to drop a truth bomb, which means you're going to bring attention to a fact or some knowledge that everyone kind of knows, but it's really devastating and everyone tries to ignore it, but you're going to drop the truth bomb. You're going to tell everybody. So for instance, you could say, I'm going to drop a truth bomb on you guys and tell you that global warming will affect our planet and ruin our planet if we don't start changing our habits. So this is some devastating news. It's some news that we kind of already know, but you're dropping the truth bomb. You're letting everybody know, and you're telling everyone to change their habits. The phrase along the lines is incredibly useful in casual spoken English. You will hear native speakers say it all of the time. If you want to say that you have an idea or just a general idea of something that you want to do or something that you want to have, you can use this phrase along the lines. So someone might say, what are you going to make for dinner tonight? And you can say, well, I was thinking something along the lines of like meat and vegetables. This means you don't know the exact recipe you're going to use, and maybe you'll do chicken, maybe you'll do beef, maybe you'll do corn, maybe you'll do carrots, but something along the lines of just meat and vegetables. You will probably variate those two things a little bit if you just have an idea of what you want to do along the lines. Or if you're like me, you never know what you're going to do on the weekend. So someone might ask you, what are your plans for the weekend? And you could say, well, I was thinking something along the lines of going for a long walk and going to some park. So you're just talking very generally, you're talking very vaguely, and you're not sure exactly what you're going to do, but you know what you want to do a little bit along the lines of. One thing that's important if you ever work in sales is to be assertive, but not too pushy. Now, this adjective pushy, it means you're too assertive and you're trying to make someone buy something or do something and they don't like it. So this adjective, pushy, it comes from the phrase to push something on someone. So when you push something on someone else, it means you make them do it, or you make them take it or have it, or you make them accept a favor that maybe they didn't want to accept. So for instance, some people will push food and drinks on you when you go to their house. They'll say, have another drink. No, I insist. Go, go, go. Or they'll say, here, you need to eat some of this food. I insist. Even if you say, I'm full, I don't want anything, they will push food on you. Maybe you want to offer someone something. Maybe you want to offer them help or a gift or something, but you're not sure if they want to accept it. So you'll say, I don't want to push this on you, but if you wanted to, I could help you out on Saturday or whatever it is. So to push something means to assert something or make someone accept something. But if you use this in the way that you say, I don't want to do it, it just means You don't want to be pushy. You're trying to be polite. You let the person know that they can not accept what you're asking or what you're telling, and your feelings won't be hurt if you say, I don't want to push this on you. Some people say that we are living in the peak of human existence right now. This means that for as long as humans have been alive, this is the greatest time to be alive, but it might get worse after this. I don't know if that's true, but that's just the first example that came to mind when teaching this phrase, to peak, when something peaks. So normally a peak in English means the top of a mountain, the very, very top. Now, when we talk about someone peaking in life, it means that their life is really good. They have accomplished really high things. They're very successful. But if we say they're peaking, it means they're not going to get better. They're just going to get worse. When you say that something has peaked, you can say it has gotten as good as it's going to get, but it's not going to get any better. It's probably going to get worse. You might hear in the media someone say they reached the peak of their popularity. So I picture music like Harry Styles, like pop music. You know, it was really popular a year ago, his music was, and it probably peaked. I don't know if it will be as popular in the future, but I could be wrong. Some people say it's not good to peak in life when you're young, even though you feel like you want to be popular when you're young with your friends and you want to be very cool. It's actually better to peak as an older adult because things will get better then in your life and not just worse after being a kid. Have you ever listened to music and at first you didn't really like it, or you thought it was okay, but you didn't see yourself listening to it a lot, but then you grew to like it, it became your favorite music? Well, this is the next phrase, to grow to like something or to grow to dislike something. These phrases mean that you are changing your opinion over time. So maybe you like something a little bit at the beginning, but the more and more you do it, or the more and more you're exposed to it, the more you grow to like it, which means you like it a lot. When I first heard Bad Bunny's music, I thought it was okay. I didn't see myself listening to it a lot. But then I started listening to the album every day, and I really, really grew to like Bad Bunny and his music. The next phrase that I'm going to teach you is to dangle something. Now, literally, to dangle something would mean to hold it out in front of a person or an animal to try to get them, to come to you or do a trick or something. But we use this often metaphorically or in an idiomatic way as well. So you could say, I was dangling some candy, or I was dangling a reward in front of my kid in order to get them to clean their room. This doesn't mean you were literally holding it, but you were saying, hey, if you clean your room, you're going to get a treat later. So you can use it in this way, or adults sometimes have things dangled in front of them in order to work harder. For instance, your boss might say, hey, you're going to get a pay raise at the end of the year if you do all this work and finish all these things, and if you stay late every day. So they're asking a lot of you, but they're promising something that's not for sure, but they're kind of dangling it in front of you. And oftentimes when this happens, I feel like people are lying. Like they're saying, oh, it's going to be so great. You just have to work really hard for it. They're dangling a reward in front of you. They're trying to get you to work harder. This next phrase is incredibly common for native English speakers to say, and I think it comes so naturally to say that we don't often notice that we're using this phrase. The phrase is in retrospect. Now, this phrase is very simple to use. If you want to say that you're reflecting on something that happened in the past, knowing what you would know now in the present, you can say, well, in retrospect, I would have done this instead. So for instance, in retrospect, many people would have invested in companies like Apple 30 years ago, knowing what they know now. And now they would be millionaires because they would have made so much money. You can use this in your own personal life too. You could say, in retrospect, I would have dressed warmer if I knew it was going to be so cold out today. So this means you got up in the morning, you got dressed, not knowing what the weather would be later in the day. In a casual English conversation, you can use this phrase to bring in the big but. If you want to talk about someone who's making a lot of money, like a lot of money, use this phrase. It's kind of funny. So for instance, at first, Ed Sheeran, I just watched the Ed Sheeran documentary. I thought it was pretty good. He was just performing on the street. He was what we call busking. He was asking for money for just playing his guitar and singing on the street. He wasn't really bringing in the big bucks though. This means he was not making very good money yet. Now he sells out stadiums with thousands of people, so he is really bringing in the big bucks as an international pop star. When you want to say that attention has been brought to something or some sort of event, you can say that it has come into the spotlight. So a literal spotlight would mean to shine light on something on stage so that everyone looks at it. But if you're using this phrase in an idiomatic way, you're saying that something has brought attention to an important issue or to a person. So recently there was the tragic submarine accident, the OceanGate submersible, but that has really brought into spotlight how dangerous the ocean can actually be. I didn't know anything about submarines or going down under to see the Titanic until this accident. So it really brought in the dangers of the ocean into the spotlight. This means all the media and all of the news has been focused on this event. This next phrase can be used in a really funny way. When you want to say that someone is being so bold, so hypocritical, they're being too assertive, you can say, wow, the audacity. So if you say that someone is audacious, this is an adjective that means that a person is willing to take risks. But usually this can be used in a positive way to describe someone. But if you say, I can't believe the audacity of this person, it's used negatively. You're saying they don't have a right to be so bold or to be so assertive. So for instance, if you have a boss that shows up late every day to work, and then they show up late and they say, wow, you need to get work done, or you need to not take so long of a lunch, you could say, the audacity of saying that to me when you're the one that shows up late every day. So you're saying it's kind of hypocritical, it's kind of bold of them to say something bad about your own actions when their actions aren't perfect either. Another example that comes to mind is if your parents comment on something that you don't think they have a right to comment on because they're not perfect either. You could say, you guys have the audacity to talk about my finances, or you guys have the audacity to talk about where I live, whatever it might be. You're just saying that they are being too bold and they should stay out of your business. When you want to describe someone that is very sad and they look very helpless, you can use the phrase, they look like a sad puppy. Whenever I watch a championship sports game, the losing team after the game, they always look like sad puppies. That means they always look so sad and defeated, just like a puppy would be, like if they were sad, because you're like, oh, I feel so bad for them. So you're saying like you have sympathy for someone if they look like a sad puppy. You might hear this phrase used in television shows or movies as well. This next English phrase is so common, so pay close attention. If you want to say that something is going to be mentioned or something is going to be talked about, you can say it's going to be brought up. So to bring something up means to mention it or talk about it. And you can say, please don't bring this up in conversation. For instance, if someone just lost their job, you might not want to bring up finances or money around them because they might feel bad because they're going through a tough time. Or you can say, I know Kelly's looking for a job, so maybe you can bring up that your company is hiring. That just means mention it very casually, very quickly. It doesn't have to be a super serious conversation. They say it's never polite to bring up politics at the dinner table, so don't mention it, don't talk about it. Another topic that we don't often bring up in the United States is someone's age. So we won't ask them their age, or we won't talk about how old they are unless they mention it themselves. This next phrase is really great to use either in a business context or just in your everyday conversations as well. If you want to say that something was solidified, you can say it sealed the deal. So for instance, you can seal the deal on your opinion. This means you maybe didn't know how you felt about something before, but now your opinion is solid. You know exactly how you feel because it was sealed. The deal was sealed. So you could say, I didn't know how I felt about snow before this winter, but now it has really sealed the deal. I don't like it. So maybe the winter was really bad. It was really harsh. Your opinion is formed now. You could say, I think that we have gotten the client to agree. We just have to seal the deal by signing it. So this would be more literal. You could say the deal is not complete or solid until they sign it, even though we think they're going to agree to it, the deal. This next English phrase is a little bit confusing to English learners. When I say that someone is giving attitude, it means they're behaving in a rude way, or they're saying rude things, or they're being difficult to work with. Now, normally when we say someone's attitude, it just means the way that they act or feel towards another person or towards a thing. So you can have a positive attitude or you can have a negative attitude. When we use this phrase, someone is giving us attitude, it means that they have a negative attitude. They're being very difficult. So if you have someone that you're working with and you're pretty familiar with them, you wouldn't want to say this to your boss, and they're just being super difficult. They're not doing what you asked them to do, or they're doing it, but they're being very rude when they respond to you. You can say, why are you giving me attitude on this? This means, why are you acting rude and being difficult? Here's the thing. This next phrase is very important for you to learn. The phrase, here's the thing, just means you're about to say something very important, or you're about to say something that will give justification for something. When we use this phrase, here's the thing, we're usually saying here's a problem that we need to focus on, or here's an important piece of information that we need to focus on. And this is used all of the time in casual conversation. So maybe you get asked to go to your friend's party, but you don't have a car, so you won't be able to drive there. And maybe there's no bus that is running at the time of the party. So you could say, yes, I would love to come to your party, but here's the thing. I don't have a car and there's no bus at that time. So you're saying, yes, I want to come, but the thing or the problem is your transportation or how you will get there. So maybe in this conversation, you would solve the problem by saying, I'm going to get an Uber or a taxi, or someone can come pick you up. This next phrase is rhetorical, but it's used all of the time in daily conversation. When you start your sentence with imagine having to, you're asking someone to think of a situation, but you're not literally asking them to imagine it or to tell you about it. You're just saying like, wow, this would be a tough situation. So maybe you're looking at someone who has a large amount of kids. Maybe they have 5, 6, 7, or even 8 kids. When I see a family like that, I just say to myself, oh, imagine having to feed all of those kids. That means imagine the amount of food. It's incredible. So it can be something that's just very shocking or very awful. You could say something like, imagine having to replace all your things after you lose your house in a fire. So it's a bad situation, and you're saying, imagine having to do that because you just think it's such a bad situation, you can only imagine it. Have you ever known someone who seems to spend money on their credit card and they're living in denial that they have to pay it back at the end of the month? This English phrase, to live in denial, it means you do things without thinking about the consequences, or you ignore what's going to happen in the end. Sometimes we eat unhealthy food and we're just kind of living in denial, like the food is unhealthy. We're just saying, oh, it's okay for us, but it might not be good. So when you're living in denial, it means you're doing things and you're ignoring the consequences or the bad outcomes that might come from doing these things. And here's a bonus phrase for you. Ignorance is bliss. This phrase is saying that it's good to live in denial, which I don't know if I always agree with. When you have two options that are equally as good as one another, you can tell someone you can't go wrong with either of these options, or you can just say you can't go wrong in general. That means no matter what the person picks, it will be a good choice or a good option. The first thing that comes to mind for this phrase is ice cream. I love ice cream. There's an American store called Cold Stone, and it has tons of flavors of ice cream, maybe like 20 or 30 flavors. And honestly, you can't go wrong with any of the flavors, and you get to mix in candy too. So no matter what you choose when you go to Cold Stone, you just can't go wrong. That means every ice cream flavor is really good. There are so many ways in the English language to say we're going to leave. One phrase that I wanted to teach in this lesson is we're off. Or if you're not contracting the first part of this phrase, you can say we are off. If you're working at an office and your coworker wants to go to lunch with you, you can say, let me just finish this email and then we're off to lunch. That means we'll leave as soon as I'm done with this task. Or if you're in a casual conversation with someone and you're going to say, we're going to leave now, you're going to say, okay, yeah, we're off now. This means we are leaving now. It's a very casual way to say this. One common stereotype about Americans is that we love guns. And this next phrase is a gun to your head. I don't know if this stereotype is true to everyone. I've heard that people that believe that stereotype or that idea and then come here from another country are always like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. You guys don't all love guns so much. So when you use this phrase, gun to your head, it means you have to make a decision like a gun is to your head, like someone is threatening you, even though you don't have time to research or you don't have time to think about your options a lot. So you could give someone a weird situation that they have to think about, like a would you rather. You could say, would you rather freeze to death or would you rather burn to death? And the person says, I don't know, those both sound awful. You could say, well, gun to your head, make a decision. That means don't think about it too much, just think about it as if I was threatening you. It's a really weird phrase, but you will hear this in English conversation. It's really important to be able to use this next phrase in a sentence when you're speaking English. The phrase is to the extent of something. This means you're talking about how wide something reaches, either in its size or how many people it impacts or how long something is going to go. So a really simple example is when there's a natural disaster like a hurricane, a tsunami, or a tornado, you can say, what is the extent of the damage? Or you can say, we're really lucky because everyone survived the disaster, but the extent of the damage is, lots of houses have been damaged. Maybe you're describing to someone the work that they have to do for their job. You can say, well, you are in charge of getting the mail, you're in charge of replying to emails, and you are in charge of keeping clients happy. That's the extent of your job, though. That means that's everything that you have to do. Your job doesn't reach any further than those things that I just told you. So the extent is the limit of something. A really common phrase in English is if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. So this phrase means that if you support everything, your support isn't as important because you don't have the few things that you are supporting. So you have to have really strong morals and you have to have really strong ethics. Now, the phrase that I want to teach you is to stand up for someone. So if you stand up for someone, it means you defend them in a situation where they're being bullied, they're being harassed, or people are talking negative to them. One thing that's important to me in life is to stand up for people who are normally discriminated against. So people with disabilities, they might not have the accommodations that they need, or they might not be able to do everything that everyone else does because of their disability. So it's important to stand up for them, to help them out, and to tell people that they need to be included, because it's really important to stand up for people who cannot always defend themselves or they can't always advocate for themselves in a situation. Have you ever met someone who talks a big game? The classic example that comes to my mind when I think of this phrase is the UFC fighter Conor McGregor. He used to say, I will knock out this person in the first round. He would make his own predictions. He would talk a big game. Usually when someone talks a big game, it means they talk about their abilities or they talk about what they're going to do in a way that's very dramatic, and they won't actually be able to accomplish many of those things. Now, the reason that Conor McGregor, got so famous is he talked a big game and he actually did a lot of the things that he said he was going to do. So if you talk a big game, you have to back it up. That means your actions have to match your words. If something is very difficult or challenging, you might describe it as an uphill battle.
But it's going to be an uphill battle.
Sometimes if you have children, you clean your house, you put everything away, and then the kids get home from school and they just kind of mess everything up and get fingerprints all over and take out all the toys. So it is an uphill battle keeping your house clean. It just means it's very challenging, and it feels like no matter how hard you work, the challenge just keeps coming back. Learning English sometimes feels like an uphill battle. No matter how much you study, you might feel like you learned some words in a conversation that you hadn't learned before. And I think everyone feels like it's an uphill battle, even if they're speaking really good English. One thing in life that's very important is that when someone gives you an opinion about something and they're not an expert, make sure to take it with a grain of salt.
It's important to take the future with a grain of salt.
This means that you shouldn't value their opinion a lot because it might not be as important as you think. If you want to tell someone that you're going to share your opinion, but you don't want them to worry about your opinion too much, you're not an expert on the matter, you could say, well, take it with a grain of salt. So what I'm saying, don't place a lot of importance on it. If you want to say, someone is commenting about something in your life, maybe they're saying, you should be doing this in your career, you should go back to school and get another degree, but you don't think they're an expert, you can say, well, I'll take that with a grain of salt, meaning you will place a small amount of importance on it and you won't really listen. Practice what you preach. This is so important, and it's a saying that I say all of the time. I personally like to say lead by example or practice what you preach. This means your actions should be the same as your words or advices. So for instance, maybe your boss is saying it's so important to be on time to work, but your boss is not always on time to work. They do not practice what they preach. So you could say to them, well, you should practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach.
A really strange idiom in English, and I know a lot of different languages have a version of this idiom, is you can't have your cake and eat it too.
You cannot have your cake and eat it too.
So this means you might have conflicting desires in life. Maybe you want to get a promotion at work, but you also want to enjoy your life and take a lot of vacations during the year, so you can't always get your cake and eat it too. This means you can't enjoy a lot of vacations and get a promotion at your work. Hopefully you can enjoy your life, but I know in a lot of jobs, they are wanting you to be very serious, not take a lot of vacation time in order to advance and get a promotion. If you have some negative news to share or something very disappointing to someone who is very excited, you might have to rain on their parade.
Rain on your parade.
Maybe someone is very excited to go to a concert that's at an outdoor venue. You might say, I hate to rain on your parade, but the weather is actually supposed to be very bad, and I think the concert is going to get canceled. So you're sharing some really disappointing news when they are very excited about something. Have you ever acted in the heat of the moment? When we use this phrase in English, we mean that someone is acting very impulsively or very emotionally.
Heat of the moment.
When two people are in the heat of the moment in an argument, it means they're acting so emotionally and they might just say something that is really mean in the heat of a moment. So this means it's a very emotionally charged, passionate moment. And sometimes people don't think about what they're saying very much when they are so emotional and so charged up. So we use this phrase to talk about making a decision when we were very emotional. In English, we have a lot of strange idioms that involve our feet. Can you think on your feet? This is a very important skill. If you can think on your feet, it means you can react to things and come up with a plan very quickly without having to think about it for a long time. For instance, maybe you're supposed to have a party or a wedding outside, and again, it starts raining, so you have to think on your feet and come up with another plan. Maybe you need to change where you're going to have the wedding or get a big tent so not everyone gets rained on. If you're giving a presentation and you have a slideshow and your computer isn't working, you might have to think on your feet and just give the presentation without your slides because it's not an option. So thinking on your feet is thinking quickly, making improvisations, and just doing what you need to do without having a lot of planning or preparation. It's important to work hard even when the going gets tough.
When the going gets tough, the tough get going.
We describe a difficult situation as when the going gets tough. And the full phrase or the full idiom for this is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So this just is a phrase that we use when people need to be tough, hardworking, dedicated, and not give up easily. Oftentimes when people are in a marriage, when the going gets tough, they might get divorced. So you might need to say, when the going gets tough, you need to work through your problems in a marriage and not just get a divorce, because that's becoming so common these days. If you are in a very risky situation or you're very close to being in big trouble, you might be what we describe as on thin ice.
You're on thin ice, Garrison!
If it's wintertime and very cold out, the lakes and the rivers and the ponds, they freeze. And if you're not familiar with this, you can actually walk on the ice usually. But if the ice is not frozen enough and it's very thin, you could fall through and be in great danger in very cold water. So using this as an idiom, we describe a very risky situation as thin ice. If you have been in trouble a lot at work and if you don't meet your next deadline on your project, you'll be on very thin ice with your boss because you might get fired. You're in a risky situation if you don't improve your performance. An interesting way that we caution someone in English is not just be careful, we say easy does it.
Easy does it.
So the other day I was moving a couch with my husband. We were lifting it upstairs and I said easy does it because I didn't want to knock the couch into the wall. So this is just a reminder that you can say to mean just be careful, be delicate, be gentle. If you want to make sure that someone doesn't accidentally hurt themselves by falling, you can say, easy does it, don't fall. Many times in English, instead of saying, handle this in your own way, people will say, do your thing.
Do your thing, Tom.
So this phrase is used really informally just to say, yeah, just do it the way that you want to do. Don't let me interrupt you. Oftentimes, if someone is just wanting to watch what you're doing, they don't want to interact and they don't want to interfere. Maybe you are cooking something in a certain way and they say, oh, I don't want to help. I don't want to get involved. I'm just watching. I'm trying to learn. They'll say, oh, do your thing. I'm just watching. So this phrase, do your thing, it's really informal and you wouldn't necessarily be able to guess exactly what it means. But now you know if someone says, oh, just do your thing, it means proceed, don't stop, don't let me interrupt or interfere. Instead of saying, let's compete against each other, English speakers will say, let's go head to head.
You want to go head to head with me.
So when someone says, let's go head to head, that means let's have a competition, let's go against each other. Oftentimes, if you are trying to do something really fast, let's say one person is playing a video game and you are playing the same video game. Now, if you two want to compete, instead of saying, let's compete or let's go against each other, you'll say, let's go head to head. And that means let's compete directly against one another to see who is better. So oftentimes, if you want to see who is better at something, you'll say, I want to see you two go head to head. That means compete against one another in the same competition or the same game. In really casual conversations, someone might say to you, hey, let's link up soon. This very informal phrase, to link up, it means to get together or to hang out for a bit. Maybe you have an old group of friends and you guys have been trying to arrange a meeting or a get together. You can say, hey, let's text each other and try to link up sometime next week. This means we're all going to try to meet at the same place. It's the exact same as saying get together, but again, it's very informal and very casual to say, oh, do you want to link up sometime next week? And this is a phrase that we use with a friend that just means let's get together at a certain time, to link up. You may have previously learned in English, we say, I arrived late at the meeting. Now in English, oftentimes, even formally, people will say, I showed up at the meeting late. Hopefully you weren't late. Hopefully I wasn't late. But just for this example, it is talking about the time that someone arrives or gets to a place, the time that they show up. So if something shows up, it literally means to appear, but we often use it instead of saying we arrived. What time did you show up at the party last night? This means what time did you arrive at the party? Or if someone is either not showing up or showing up, it means they have not arrived, they did not come at all. Or they showed up last night. That means they came. It's not a specific time. It just means they were there. Let's say you are trying to exercise and work out and be more healthy. You might say, I haven't showed up at my gym in so long. This means you haven't actually gone or arrived to your gym in a long time. And you can say, I need to start showing up at the gym more often. Meaning you need to actually go there and exercise and show up more often. So when we say someone is always showing up, it's a really informal kind of idiom phrase that means that they consistently do something. They're always showing up at the gym. They're always showing up on time. This means they do it consistently. They are always arriving or being at a place.
What do you mean you show up? I show up.
This next phrase is such a useful one in English. The phrase is to each their own.
To each their own stuff.
Let me give you some context about how to use this phrase. So maybe you have a friend and she spends a lot of money on purses, handbags. Maybe she buys a very, very expensive handbag for thousands of dollars. And your other friend says, do you like that handbag? And you say, well, personally, I would never spend thousands of dollars on a handbag or a purse, but to each their own. This phrase, to each their own, it just means that everyone is entitled to their own opinions and everyone is entitled to do what they want to do to make themselves happy. You can just even use this just to say, like, don't worry about my opinion. If you're asking for my opinion, that's fine, but I don't want to offend you. Like, if you don't like it this way, that's okay. So, for instance, someone might ask you, do you like hot coffee? You'll say, personally, I can't stand hot coffee. I like cold coffee, iced coffee, but to each their own. That means it's just my personal preference. Everybody can have their opinion. It does not matter to me, but this is just what I like. So we can use this phrase, to each their own, just to mean everyone can have their own opinion. Don't take mine personally and don't be offended by my opinion. Do you know what it means to jump in and do something or join something?
Good. Jump in.
So we use this phrase to jump in to mean that someone can become involved very quickly, either doing something or helping with something or just contributing in some way. There's a few different ways that we can use this useful phrase. Maybe you see your friend struggling to lift a heavy box and you say, oh, let me jump in and help you real quick. This means they didn't ask you for help and you weren't really planning on helping, but since you're there, you're just going to enter and help them very quickly. You're going to jump in and help. Now, in a more formal context, maybe you are in school or in a business meeting, whoever is leading the discussion might say, anyone can jump in and make a comment, or anyone can feel free to jump in and share their opinion. This means they don't have to be formally raising their hand or waiting for a time when the table is open to discussion. They can just comment at any time it feels natural, like, actually, I think this plan is not going to work, or, you can jump in and just share any sort of opinion or advice that you have. You might say, feel free to jump in if you have any suggestions about this plan. This just means don't feel afraid to share your comments or start talking while I'm talking. When someone is going to be in charge and in control of something, they are going to take over.
Okay, Serge, take over.
So this phrasal verb, it really just means that someone is now in control of something. And we use this so frequently in English. Let's talk about all the different ways that you can use the phrasal verb take over. So if you're passing on your responsibilities to someone, maybe you're at work and you'll say that your coworker Debbie is going to take over some of your responsibilities or some of your jobs. So those jobs are going to be hers now. She is in charge of them. She is going to take over. Or maybe you're in a meeting and you're the one leading the meeting and speaking, and you say, actually, Debbie is going to take over the meeting now. This means that Debbie is going to be in charge and all the focus is going to shift to her. Oftentimes, when we are on a long road trip driving somewhere and we are tired of driving, we might ask our partner or our companion, hey, would you mind taking over driving at the next stop? This means, would it be your turn? You'll be in charge of driving. We can also offer to take over sometimes too if someone needs a break from a job or a task. Maybe you have children and your husband or your wife is really tired and you can say, I'll take over with the kids right now. This means you'll take over all the responsibilities. It's just assume that the person would know what you're taking over when you say, I'll take over with the kids right now. This means I'll play with the kids, I'll watch the kids, whatever. I'll take over so that you can rest. So it's just offering to be in charge or to take a responsibility over to yourself. This next phrase, to lay down the law, it's one of those phrases that sounds really serious, but we kind of use it in a less serious, joking manner. For instance, if we want to say that someone went from being, less strict to being very firm and strict about the rules, we can say that they are really laying down the law. My boss didn't used to care if I was late, but now if I'm even a minute late, I get in trouble. They are really laying down the law. That means they're being very strict and firm about the rules. You can say if you are in charge of people at work, or if you're a parent, or if you're a teacher, I really have to lay down the law. This means you have to be very strict. And again, it is like being serious. You are saying that you need to be strict and firm, but it's kind of giving a warning if you say, I'm going to lay down the law, that you are going to be strict. So it's not super serious and stern and mean to say. It's just describing the fact that you have to go from being very relaxed to very strict and firm with the rules. I'm going to lay down the law.
You better lay down the law.
Instead of saying that you did something difficult, a phrase that you can use, you can say, I really pulled it off.
She'll pull it off.
So to pull something off, we use this phrase when you are successful in completing something very difficult, or you just didn't expect that you were able to do something. If you have a test in school and you did not study at all, but somehow you were able to pull off an A, you would have pulled off a really difficult thing to do, because typically people have to study a lot of hours to do well on a test in school. I think about the old movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you haven't seen this classic American movie, you definitely should watch it. It is still funny to this day. But basically, the main character, Ferris Bueller, played by Matthew Broderick, he pulls off having this epic day where he skips school and he doesn't get in trouble with his parents, and he kind of tricks the principal into, basically thinking that he's sick all day. So he really pulled off a difficult thing to do in this movie. So again, check out the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off if you've never seen it. It's pretty funny, and it would be a good one to practice listening to English to. Learning English is hard, but I'm sure I don't have to tell you. Okay, this phrase you can say, I don't have to tell you, or you don't have to tell me.
You don't have to tell me.
It means that you understand the complaint or the difficulty that is being spoken about. For instance, let's say you go to work every day and you fight traffic. You have to drive in a lot of traffic. And your friend says to you, oh my gosh, traffic is so bad. You can say, you don't have to tell me. I drive to work every single morning in traffic. So this just means that I have the same complaint and I have experienced it so much that you don't even have to tell me about your complaint because I understand it. So it's not being rude to say this to someone. It just means that you really understand their complaint. You share the same difficulty or struggle that they're having. So in this example, if you're saying something that you know someone else has also experienced that's a difficulty, for instance, learning English is hard, I'm sure I don't have to tell you. You're saying this phrase, I don't have to tell you, because you would know whoever's listening to you has experienced this difficulty. If someone tells me that they feel like they never have any free time, I will tell them, you don't have to tell me I have 3 kids. This just means that I feel very busy as well. I also don't feel like I have free time. Or, maybe in English, we talk a lot how we're tired all the time. I'm sure this is a really common thing that anyone in the world talks about. Maybe your friend is also tired, they're very busy, and you say, oh, this has been a long week. I'm so tired, but I'm sure I don't have to tell you. This means that you understand your friend has a busy life as well, or maybe they have a really demanding job that also makes them very tired, so you don't have to tell them. When you're studying English, even if it's hard, don't give up.
Never gives up.
So to give up is an important phrase to know in English. It means that you are stopping doing something because you think it's too hard, you think you can't do it, or you are kind of surrendering. Sometimes when someone asks a difficult question, like a trivia question, like, do you know the largest country in the world? And the person thinks to themselves, and they just don't know the answer, they'll say, I give up. This means that they, even though they thought about it, they just don't know the answer. Or maybe someone asks a riddle, and again, you just can't figure out the correct answer. You've guessed a few times. You'll say, I give up. Can you tell me the answer? This means I'm stopping. I'm not putting any more effort into this. You could also say you are going to give up something. This typically means you're going to give up a habit or an action that you do. For instance, maybe you feel like you are shopping too much. You can say, I'm going to give up shopping until the end of the year and not buy any new clothes. So this just means you're going to stop that habit. Oftentimes we use this phrase, we're going to give up smoking, we're going to give up drinking, to mean that we are going to try to stop and do these things. So those are 2 really common ways that we use the phrase to give up. Have you ever heard of someone making a mistake, like a husband, makes a mistake, maybe he forgets his wife's birthday, and to make up for it, he buys her flowers the next day. So this phrase, to make up for something, it means you're going to compensate for a mistake that you have made.
Make up for what?
A teacher might say to the class, I know that this week has been very boring because we've had a lot of tests. So to make up for that, we are going to play a game today. This just means that they are going to try to make the day fun, kind of as an apology for having a boring week at school. You can also make up for a fault or shortcoming that you have. For instance, if you are late to work, you might say, I'm going to make it up by staying late today. So you're giving extra time to the workday since you were late in the morning. To make up for being short, a lot of people wear tall shoes. This just means that they view being short as a shortcoming or a fault of theirs, so they try to make up for it by wearing shoes that make them taller. When you tell someone to look into something, you're telling them to investigate a topic or kind of examine something. For instance, right now, I'm kind of looking into buying a new car. So I'm looking at cars, I'm researching them, I'm deciding if a minivan would be good since I have 3 kids, or if I should get an even bigger car because, I have a stroller that I bring for my really young kids. So I'm just looking into it. That just means I'm researching whether I want a car that is, fitting all these different things. I'm researching. If you want to suggest that someone should research an idea, you can say you should look into this. Maybe you have a friend that is a really good singer. You could say, have you ever looked into joining a band? That means, they should sing with other people that play instruments. You can say to them, you should look into being a singer. You're so good. This means you can kind of research opportunities. You should see if it's something that you could do because you're good at it. In the year of 2024, you need to know the phrase to keep someone in the loop.
I still prefer to keep humans in the loop.
This phrase is used in corporate America all the time to just say, I'm going to keep you updated on what's going on. For instance, if you are working with someone on a project, you can say to them, just make sure you keep me in the loop on what our client says. This means keep me updated. Don't find out what the client says and then not tell me. I need to be informed on all the information regarding this project. To keep someone in the loop means to keep them updated. A really encouraging phrase that we can use to tell someone to try something, even if they've never done it before, is we can say to them, give it a shot.
I'll give that a shot. Give it a shot.
So to give something a shot means to attempt it or to try it, often for the first time. I've never cooked lamb at home before. It's just something I've never tried, but I would really like to give it a shot. This means I would like to try to do it. I would like to try to do it good and make the food taste good as well. Have you ever cooked lamb before? Should I give it a shot? Let me know any tips in the comments. A really harsh phrase that we use to say that we are going to end or discontinue something is we say we are going to pull the plug.
Or I'm pulling the plug.
So in theory, if you had a television on and you just pulled the plug out, it would completely stop right away. Oftentimes, this phrase is again used in the workplace or in business settings. If you pull the plug on the project, it just means that the project is not going very well and you're going to stop it immediately and maybe try to do something else eventually, but you're just stopping right now. Or maybe you were planning an event outside, but you had to pull the plug on it because the weather was just too bad. A phrase that almost means the opposite of pulling the plug on something is saying that you just need to roll with the punches.
She rolls with the punches.
This phrase means that despite difficulties, you just need to keep on trying and just keep working and trying to do what you need to do. Oftentimes, when people are speaking a new language, they just need to roll with the punches. This means that even though someone doesn't know a specific word for something, they don't know what a phrase means, or maybe they just feel embarrassed speaking with new people, they need to roll with the punches. Just try to keep speaking despite the difficulties of trying out a new language. So it just means, you're a relaxed person if you roll with the punches. You don't get too upset over challenges, difficulties, or things that go wrong. Are you the type of person that rolls with the punches? This just means you're relaxed and you try to keep going even when things get hard. Do you want to wrap up the meaning or should we just keep going?
Wrap it up!
So to wrap up something, it typically means that we are going to stop doing what we're doing, finish what we are doing. Oftentimes, if we're at work and we just need a few more minutes to be complete with all of our work for the day, we'll say, give me just a few minutes and then I'll wrap up. This means I'll be done at this time. If you want to tell someone that they have a time limit to finish something, you can tell them, hey, you have 5 minutes and then you have to wrap it up. This means you have to be done with your task or your meeting or whatever it might be. So to wrap up something means to be finished with something. Sometimes people on social media try to play up their lifestyle to make it look more luxurious or fancy than it actually is. To play up something, it means you are trying to make something seem more important or better than it actually is, or you're just trying to show the importance even though, it's not actually that important. So for instance, people on social media, especially influencers, they will rent really fancy cars. They'll show the nicest room of their house just to try to play up the amount of money that they have. So you can actually not be rich, but you can make it look on social media like you're very wealthy and very rich. You're just playing up your wealth. You can also play up emotions. So maybe, something made you kind of sad, but you start crying really loudly and you say, oh, my life is over. You're playing up the sadness. Maybe you're just being very dramatic, trying to get some sympathy from other people. Or maybe you play up an illness. Maybe you were a little sick, so you tell your boss at work that you can't work that day, but you were just kind of playing up your sickness. You really needed a day off. I think this is a common thing that happens, hopefully not a lot, but once in a while. So the phrase to turn up It was a really popular slang phrase. I think people still use it once in a while. It means you're kind of turning up the energy. Are we going to turn up tonight? That means, are we going to have a really fun time? Probably go out to the bars or go out to a party and drink and have fun. Are we going to turn up? Obviously, we use the phrasal verb to turn up just to mean to increase the intensity of something. Can you turn up the volume? Hey, can you turn up the music? That means, can you make it louder? Can you turn up the air? That means you are hot in the house that has air conditioning and you want there to be more air conditioning. Now, interestingly enough, sometimes people say, can you turn up the temperature instead of saying, can you turn up the air? Typically, if someone says, can you turn up the air, it means, can you make it colder in the house? Or if they say, can you turn up the temperature, it means, can you make it hotter in the house? This is where it gets a little confusing, even to native English speakers. So turning up something means increasing the intensity of it.
Turned up.
An idiom that you should know is to take a stab at something.
Okay, let me take a stab at this one.
If you take a stab at something, it means you're going to try something even though you are very inexperienced. Again, we go back to that example of making a food for the first time. Maybe you've never made a recipe, but you'll take a stab at it. That means you're going to try it, even though it might not be good. And typically we use this phrase to take a stab at something to mean that we will not feel too sad or too disappointed if it doesn't work out. The next phrase, if you are trying to come up with a plan for something, but you're not taking a really, really long time in planning it, you might say, all right, let's just take this plan and run with it. That means let's try it. Let's try to execute the plan. Let's try to do this. Maybe it is something as simple as you and a friend are planning on going out to dinner and then going to a concert on Friday night. And you can say, let's meet at your house. We'll go to dinner and then we'll take a taxi to the concert. We'll just run with this plan. This means we're just going to try it. It should work out just by planning it very simply like this. Personally, I think it's very important to think ahead.
And you're not thinking ahead.
This phrase, to think ahead, it means that you need to consider your future or plan for your future. Oftentimes, people will think ahead to retirement in the United States. This means they have to start saving money now so that when they are unable to work, they have a lot of money saved and they have invested a lot of money so they can just live on that money for the rest of their lives. This kind of system is different in every country, but it's important to think ahead in the United States if you are living and working here. You can also use this phrase, think ahead, just to mean you're going to think ahead to next week, just trying to plan out what's going to happen. So you can use the phrase to think ahead for any amount of time in the future that you're going to plan for. Maybe you're planning your next birthday and you can say, I'm already thinking ahead to next year to plan out my birthday party. A really common phrase that you're going to hear in English to give a guess on the amount of time that something takes or the amount of money that something costs is the phrase give or take. So maybe someone asks you, how much did that watch cost? And you say, about $100, give or take. Or they'll say, how much time did it take you to clean your house? You'll say, oh, probably about 2 hours, give or take. This means that you are just giving a guess. You could add a couple minutes, you could give a couple minutes, or you could take a couple minutes away. So this is the common way that this phrase to give or take is used when talking about a guess for money or a guess for time. In today's economy, a lot of people have to cut back on their spending.
Cut back on everything.
To cut back on something means to reduce the amount of it. So to cut back on spending is a really common phrase that means they need to spend less money. They need to reduce the amount of money that they spend. And of course, everyone can always do that, but it seems like today everything is so expensive, so we need to cut back. Or we could say that we are using a lot of gas in our car and it's costing us a lot of money. We could say we need to cut back on the amount that we're driving. This just means we need to reduce it. If you feel like you are eating a lot of unhealthy or junk food, you can say, I really need to cut back on my junk food. That means you need to reduce the amount of unhealthy or junk food that you're eating.
If you are in the wrong, you are guilty or responsible for a mistake.
Oftentimes, when two people have an argument over who made a mistake, one person will eventually admit they're in the wrong. This means they say it's their fault. This is a common phrase as well. Admit that you are in the wrong. This means that you admit or you say that you did break the rules and you're just being honest, saying that you are in the wrong or responsible for a mistake. If you are in the wrong, you definitely should apologize.
I'm in the wrong.
Oftentimes, if we want to say that we promise to do something, even if there are circumstances that almost prevent us from doing it, we say that we will do something no matter what.
No matter what.
So when we say this phrase, no matter what, it means regardless of the difficulties or the circumstances. Maybe you want to promise that you will help your friend move on Saturday, and you really want to promise them, so you'll say, I will help you move Saturday no matter what. So this might mean that even if your car breaks down, or even if you have plans that come up that sound more fun than helping your friend move, you are very committed and you're making a very good promise to them. Sometimes we want to say that no matter the circumstances, or, it just always feels like something happened. Like we say, every time I want to go outside and enjoy the day, no matter what, it rains. So this just means like it feels like it always rains, even if the circumstances are a day that you want to enjoy, it just feels like it always happens. So no matter what means it always happens, or it's something is committed to happening. Another phrase that goes along with no matter what is no matter what I try. So this means you try or attempt a lot of different methods to get something done or to solve a problem. And it feels like no matter what you try or how many things that you try, it just is not working. My son has a toy car, and no matter what I try to do to fix this car, the wheels are always falling off of it. I can try gluing them, screwing them on. I've tried all sorts of different super glues to keep the wheels on. No matter what, it just keeps breaking. And I think that's because my son is a little rough and tough on his toy. Have you ever been out enjoying your day and suddenly you realize, or you start to think about, the fact that you left your oven on at home, or you left something else hot on at home, and it makes you worry a lot? This is a pretty common experience. One phrase that we can use in this situation when a thought suddenly comes in your brain, it kind of hits you, is you can say, it dawned on me. So I was out enjoying my day and it dawned on me that I forgot to turn off my curling iron. So this means the thought just popped into my head. When we say that something dawns on us, it means we realize something, or we think about something kind of revolutionary or a big idea, or just something that we totally forgot earlier. If you've ever been in public and someone comes up to you and they say your name, they say, oh, hi, Kate, how you doing? You might start talking to them and you think to yourself, I have no idea who this person is. But then during the conversation, they mention something about the time you met before, and it will dawn on you who they are and where you met them. And this has happened to me. I forget people all the time, but it dawns on you in the middle of the conversation who they are, and hopefully you can recover and make the conversation more polite and friendly after that.
Dawned on me.
There are a ton of ways in English to say that you are annoyed or irritated. Here is another one. If you want to say you're annoyed or irritated, you can say that you are irked.
She's irked.
She's irked.
Now, this is more of a slang or informal phrase. If you want to say that you're annoyed, for instance, maybe someone you work with is always late and you plan a meeting with them and they're late to the meeting. You can say, it really irked me when they were late to the meeting, or it really irks me how they're always late. So irked means almost the exact same as annoyed or irritated. It's a pretty negative word to say that you're irked with someone or something. Maybe there's a sound in your room or in your house that prevents you from sleeping because it's so irritating. You could say, the sound of my faucet leaking really irks me. So it annoys you or irritates you. In English, there are also so many ways to say calm down, take it easy, relax, slow down. One really common way we say this, a really good informal phrase that you'll hear every day in English, is, hey, slow your roll. This means stop going so fast. Stop rushing something. If you just relax and go slow, it will be much more calming.
Literally slow your roll.
Maybe someone is excited because you said you're going to plan a trip with them, and they say, I gotta go buy tickets right now. I gotta start packing. And you say, hey, slow your roll. I have to figure out if I can get vacation from work or some days off before we can buy tickets and plan this. So this just means relax. We have to slow down the process. Don't be so eager to start the process. Slow your roll. Maybe if you have kids and they come in the house and they start grabbing all this food, and you might say, hey, slow your roll. We're about to eat some dinner soon. So don't just grab all this food and eat because I'm going to serve you dinner and I still want you to be hungry. Slow your roll means relax, calm down, slow down the process. To slip through the cracks.
How did this slip through the cracks?
This phrase is used to say that a problem was overlooked or neglected. In hospitals, it's really common for health problems to sometimes slip through the cracks. You have to be very careful when you're a doctor or a nurse, and you have to constantly communicate, or patients can have a health problem that just doesn't get communicated, or they can be having some symptoms that the doctor does not know about because the communication was bad. And if a problem slips through the cracks in a hospital, it can be life or death. And another way that we use this phrase very commonly is when students are in a school with teachers. If a teacher doesn't realize that a student is not being successful, they're not actually learning some of the concepts, they are slipping through the cracks. That means they'll pass on to the next grade and they won't have actually gotten smarter. So it's a problem. They're being neglected if they slip through the cracks. We can also use this phrase to slip through the cracks when a problem just goes completely unnoticed. And then we want to say, why wasn't that problem solved? Or why was that mistake not seen? We can just say, well, it just kind of slipped through the cracks. This just means it was such a small problem at the time that nobody noticed until it became a bigger problem. The next phrase that I want to teach you today is the phrase to check all the boxes. This phrase is used to say that something meets all of the requirements or the criteria. For instance, when we're going shopping for a house, we might say this house totally checks all the boxes. That means it has all of the things that you are really wanting to have in a house. Maybe you needed a certain number of bedrooms for your family. Maybe you were hoping to have a big bathtub and a big kitchen and a big yard. It checks all the boxes. Or if you're going house shopping and you really like the house, you really like the neighborhood, but you were hoping the house would maybe have more an updated feel to it, or it had nicer bedrooms, you could say the house doesn't quite check all of the boxes. This just means it does not meet all the criteria that you had in your head. If you want to say to someone that you need to work hard in order to meet all of the expectations and all of the criteria for a project, you could say we really have to check all of the boxes on this one and work very carefully. It just means that you are not missing anything that needs to be done. Have you ever had one of those moments in life where you just feel so confident and so successful? In English, we have a phrase to describe this feeling. The phrase is riding high.
He's riding high.
When you feel like you're riding high, you just feel like everything is going correctly. It's going right in life. After my wedding, it was just such a fun time with all of my friends, my family. Everyone had the greatest time. I had gotten wedding gifts and we were going on our honeymoon. I was totally riding high. And another way we use this phrase in English sometimes, we're not talking about drugs or being intoxicated, is we say, we are on a high. This just means we're having a really good time. We feel like we're really successful. Things are going our way. They're going our way for us in life. So you can either say riding high or on a high. At first glance.
At first glance.
We use this phrase very commonly in English to say that at our first observation or the first time we look at something, it seems like one thing, but if you look at it further after first glance, it might be something else. For instance, I was at the park the other day with my children, and there was this woman there. She had red hair, and she had 2 young children with her as well with red hair. And so at first glance, I thought she was their mom. And I said, oh, how old are your kids? And she said, I'm actually the nanny. which means like the babysitter or the person who watches the kids. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry to mistake you for the mom. She said, no, I'm not a mom. I just happen to have red hair, just like the kids I watch all day. So at first glance, I thought she was the mom, but after asking her, she wasn't. It was a little bit awkward, but she said that it was a common mistake that other people make. So at first glance, you might think something and then you might be corrected later. When we're asked to solve a problem and we're an expert on something, we might take a look at the problem just very quickly and without making our final judgment of the problem or saying, this is how you're actually going to solve it, we can just say what our thoughts are at first. We can say, at first glance, I think you might be looking at this problem. And when we say this, we mean that we want to study it a bit more before we actually can say exactly how to solve the problem, or we need to study it a bit more to be sure of how we solve the problem, but you're just giving your first guess by looking at it very quickly. And this is how we use the phrase, at first glance. Another very similar phrase to at first glance is off the cuff.
Nothing off the cuff.
When we do something off the cuff, it just means that we didn't have any preparation or we didn't have a lot of thought going into it. We just did it very quickly because, it was just asked of us to do it right now. A really common way we use this phrase is we say, I'm just giving a speech off the cuff. That means you did not prepare for the speech that you had to give and you actually didn't know ahead of time that you were going to give the speech. Or maybe you did and you just didn't prepare, but it just means you're talking just out of your own brain. You don't have anything formally prepared for the speech. You're speaking off the cuff. Again, you might ask an expert some questions about a problem or a question that you have, and they might just be speaking off the cuff. This just means that they don't know a ton about the situation yet, but they're just giving their expert opinion without a lot of prepared thoughts. A phrase that I find very useful is the phrase to work somebody in. When you work someone or something into your schedule, this is commonly how the phrase is used, it means that you are going to try to make some time for something. Oftentimes, when you are going to somebody who provides a service, like maybe they give haircuts or they do nails or something and they have a busy schedule, and you ask them at the last minute, hey, do you have any time to do my hair today? It's really important. I have a big wedding this weekend or I have a big meeting and I want to look nice. They say, well, I am booked for the day. This means their schedule is completely full. But if I have some time, usually when I eat lunch, I can work you in. This just means that they can try to make a little bit of space in their schedule. Maybe if someone doesn't show up or if they just want to do your hair over their lunch break, they're working you into your schedule. Maybe it's important to you to start exercising, but you feel like you're really busy. You might say, I need to work in some time to exercise into my schedule. This just means you need to make some space, even though it's busy. You need to try to find a few minutes a day to exercise or go for a good walk. I recommend working in some time to study English into your schedule every day. A really common phrase that you might have heard English speakers use is, it's harder than it sounds.
It's harder than it sounds.
So this phrase means that you can say something, you can say, find some time to study English every single day. That sounds very easy. Of course, you could just go watch a television show in English, or you could just watch a YouTube video or read a book in English. This sounds very easy, but it's harder than it sounds. Another way that we use this phrase is we say it's more difficult than it sounds. Of course, difficult and hard can mean exactly the same thing. Maybe your friend just lost their job and you say, well, maybe you should start your own business. Your friend might say, starting your own business is harder than it sounds. This means, you can just say that. It sounds easy to just say it, but to actually do it is more difficult. It takes a lot of time. So we use this phrase when we're just saying that somebody is saying something to us like it's easy, but we want to recognize or tell them that it actually is difficult. Do you have the guts to go skydiving? I certainly don't have the guts to do this, but a lot of people do. This phrase, to have the guts, it means to have the courage or to be brave enough to do something. And we can use this phrase, have the guts, in extreme examples like skydiving, or maybe just a smaller example like, do you have the guts to go ask this girl out on a date. This just means, are you brave enough and do you have the courage to do something? Guts in English is a slang word for courage. If you want to say that someone is really good at something and they've done it better right now than they've ever done it before, you can use this English phrase. The phrase is, you have outdone yourself.
They're planning to outdo themselves.
So the phrase is to outdo oneself. Really common way that we use this phrase is if there's someone who's cooking a meal, like a chef, and they're really, really good at cooking, and you've had a lot of good meals from them. You go to their house, you visit, and they make you the best food ever. You can say, you have really outdone yourself. This is a very polite comment to make. It's a really good compliment to give someone who is cooking food when you find their food really, really good. So oftentimes when people do really nice stuff for us, when we visit them, and they're just providing a lot of comfort for you, you can say, you have really outdone yourself. And if you are in a competition or you're at work and you think you've done a really good job, you could say, I've really outdone myself this time. This just means you have beaten your personal best. When you want to say that you need to focus on something closely or more intensely, you can say that you're going to zero in on it.
Hey, he zeroed in on something already.
For instance, if you are in school, in college, or university, it becomes the end of the semester and you really need to zero in on studying for your final examination. This means you need to stop doing other activities because these examinations are so important that you need to zero in and focus very hard. Another thing, if you're searching for something and you want to focus on just one thing or one area for it, you can use this phrase to zero in on something. When there is a crime and there is a detective or a police officer searching for the person who did it, they might start to get some clues that help them zero in on a person that they think did the crime, or as we call them, the suspect. So if they are pretty sure that someone did it, they'll start zeroing in on this person, trying to find more evidence that they did the crime. A really common way that we say that somebody has followed the rules or the guidelines or they have been very honest is to say that they have played by the rules.
And play by the rules.
At work, it's very important to play by the rules. This means not lie, cheat, or steal. Now, sometimes when you're in a competition with someone, they can do some things that are dishonest to try to win, and that means that they did not play by the rules. Some people use this phrase, hey, we don't play by the rules, to mean that they don't do things in the conventional or the normal way that the thing is done. They try to do something that is revolutionary or different in order to accomplish the task. And a lot of times when people use this phrase in this way, it doesn't mean that they're trying to be dishonest. It means that they're just not trying to do everything the same way or by the rules that have been established for a long time. So for this phrase, it doesn't actually have to be very formal rules. You can either be talking about just the conventional way that something is done to mean rules, or you can just mean that someone is being honest and playing by the rules. When you want to say that someone has planned something very thoroughly and carefully, you can say that they have left nothing to chance.
You leave nothing to chance, huh?
This, again, is a really common phrase in English to use when someone is just very meticulous and they want nothing to go wrong in a very important plan. A lot of times when people plan their wedding days, they will plan, when the pictures will be, how they'll be arriving there, exactly what they'll be wearing, exactly who will be bringing their grandma to the wedding. They do not leave anything to chance. This just means they try to think of every detail so that everything happens correctly and everything is good on the day and nothing just sporadically happens that ruins the day or, creates a problem. So they leave nothing to chance. If you want to tell someone to be very prepared for something, make sure to tell them, do not leave anything to chance. This just means actually think through all the details of the plan. A phrase that is sort of similar to leaving nothing to chance is the phrase, leave no stone unturned.
Leave no stone unturned.
And this phrase is used more in the instance of searching for something. It means you need to be very thorough in searching for something It's almost like you're looking through a bunch of rocks in the woods. You wouldn't want to skip a rock or have a stone unturned. So this is a phrase that we use. You'll have to let me know if you have a similar phrase in your language as well. This idiom, leave no stone unturned, I think is pretty universal. Maybe someone in your family has a rare health problem and you have gone to every expert that you can find. You have gone to Google many times and searched for an answer to the problem. You have left no stone unturned. This means you have searched everywhere for a solution to the problem. And if you're looking in your house for an object, or you're looking around somewhere where you think you have lost it, you can use this idiom as well to say that you have searched very thoroughly. I lost my phone yesterday and I went back to the park. I left no stone unturned looking for it. This means you were very thorough and you looked everywhere it could possibly be. To stay on track.
Stay on track.
If you want to say that someone is remaining focused and they're remaining on schedule, you can say that they are staying on track. You can think about a running race that's on a track or a circular running path. And if someone stays on track, they will eventually get to the finish line. So that's kind of the idea of where this idiom comes from. Sometimes when you're trying to finish a project at work, there might be some setbacks, but it's important to try to stay on track with the schedule that you created so that you can still finish the project on time. Maybe you say to your family, okay, we need to clean up the house today. And as you're cleaning, someone in your family finds some old pictures and you guys are all looking at old pictures and your old photo albums, which can be really, really fun, but you need to put them away and stay on track. Otherwise, the house is not going to get clean for the day. You guys aren't focused. You need to say to your family, let's stay on track. Let's keep cleaning. We can look at these after. If you're familiar with the sport of baseball, this next idiom might make sense to you. The phrase is out of left field.
A little out of left field, but I think it's terrific.
When something is extremely unexpected or surprising, we say it's out of left field. Typically in baseball, we say the left outfield is a less active position and there's not as many balls going out there. So it's far out and we just don't expect a lot to be happening there. So this idiom just translates to mean that something comes, out of nowhere. You're not expecting it. You're really surprised by it. You don't really have a reason to why it happened. We say it's out of left field. Maybe your friend who does not even have a boyfriend or a husband, they come to you and they say, I'm pregnant. You would say, wow, that was out of left field. I was not expecting that. And that would be very, very surprising. You can also use this for very pleasant surprises, like maybe someone, brought you warm cookies. You could say, well, it was so unexpected and out of left field. Thank you so much. That means it's not your birthday or any sort of celebration. They just did something nice for completely no reason, it seems like. A force to be reckoned with.
Indeed, a force to be reckoned with.
This phrase means that you should not deal with something that is really influential or powerful very lightly, and you should be very prepared if you are going to deal with them or you're going to try to fight against them. This is a really common way we use this phrase. The phrase is a force to be reckoned with. The phrase reckon with something means to prepare for it. Oftentimes when we use this phrase, that is a force to be reckoned with, means that it is a really powerful thing or a really influential thing. If you're going to try to fight against it, you need to be very prepared and don't think that it's just easy. The American military is a force to be reckoned with. Of course, we have more military than anyone else in the world. So people try not to reckon with the military because, they're very powerful. We can just describe individuals who are very hardworking or powerful as well as a force to be reckoned with. If you want to say that someone will fight for their ideas or their opinions no matter what, and we notice that they are very hardworking and powerful, we can say you are a force to be reckoned with. This just means that if anyone wants to debate with you, they should really be prepared because you are very hardworking and powerful. A great informal phrase to say that something is of the highest quality is to say it's top notch.
Top notch.
If you want to recommend a hotel or a restaurant to someone and you want to tell them that it's really good food, it's in really high quality, and everything is good about it, you can say it is top notch. Or you could say the food is top notch or the service is top notch. You're basically saying it's of the highest quality. You can also compliment someone's work or performance by saying your work was top notch or your performance was top notch. If you want to say that something is not of the highest quality, but it's pretty good, you can say it's perfectly fine. The weather today was perfectly fine. This means it wasn't too hot, it wasn't too cold. It wasn't the nicest day ever. Maybe it wasn't a day where you want to go swimming or you want to spend a ton of time outside. But if you say it's perfectly good, that means it's okay. If you want to say it's perfectly fine, it means there is nothing really wrong with it. Someone might tell you it's perfectly fine to ask for help if you need it. This means there is no problem with asking for help. Or maybe someone has you over to their house and they say it's perfectly fine if you want to leave your shoes on. It's not perfectly fine in my house, but for some people, it is perfectly fine. They don't really care if you leave your shoes on when you come into their house. Another really informal and kind of funny phrase to use when you want to tell someone to calm down, relax, or slow down is to say, cool your jets.
Oh, cool your jets.
So we think about a jet or an airplane and, they're very hot and they're ready to go. The engines are. You can say, cool your jets to mean, turn them off. Don't be so ready to go because we have to just calm down for a minute. Maybe your friend is asking you, are you on your way? Are you coming? You might say, cool your jets. I have to take a shower and eat breakfast before I come over to your house. This just means relax. I'll be there soon on my own time. So be careful about how you use this phrase because it could be offensive if someone is eager and they might find it offensive if you tell them to calm down. If you want to tell someone that they need to spend their time and their energy on something, you can tell them to channel their energy into that thing. For instance, when your children are crying and complaining, you might say, why don't you channel your energy into doing something more productive, like reading a book or going to play with some Legos or doing an art project. This just means instead of spending your energy complaining or in a negative way, channel your energy into something positive and productive. Sometimes when people have tragedies in their life, they will channel their energy into doing something productive for society, like starting a charity or honoring someone who has died. They'll channel their grief, their energy into, doing good things for other people to honor that person. So when we tell someone to channel their energy into something, we're just saying that they need to try to have their effort or their enthusiasm into something else rather than something negative or unproductive. Some people say that the show The Simpsons is dead on in their predictions. If you haven't heard about this, Google The Simpsons theories. They have predicted a lot of things on their show that have actually happened later in real life. So we use the phrase dead on to mean accurate. This is an informal phrase that we use a lot of times in English. Maybe you are in an archery competition with a bow and arrow and you hit the bullseye. You could say that shot was dead on. It was very accurate. If you want to say that two things are completely different and not even comparable, you can say they are like apples and oranges. This idiom is pretty funny to use.
Apples and oranges here, Sheldon.
So American football and what the rest of the world calls football is like apples and oranges. They're not the same at all. Just because we call them the same thing does not mean they're comparable. So this is just giving your opinion like they're not the same at all. They're like apples and oranges. Of course, they're both fruits, but they taste completely different and they feel completely different. Some people prefer Coke to Pepsi, and they like Coca-Cola so much that they say Coke and Pepsi are like apples and oranges. You can't even compare them. Or some people might like Pepsi more than Coca-Cola, and they might say the same exact thing, just with Pepsi instead of Coca-Cola. So if you want to say that two things are not of the same quality or just can't be compared even though they're similar, you can say they're apples and oranges. If you want to say that there was a moment that was very awkward and embarrassing, You can use this phrase cringeworthy. Maybe you go to a stand-up comedy show and the comedian is telling jokes and nobody is laughing. You could say that performance was absolutely cringeworthy. It was very uncomfortable. Or maybe there is a moment in a meeting at work where someone starts crying and getting very emotional and everyone just feels very awkward and uncomfortable about it. You could say it's kind of cringeworthy. Now, this phrase is definitely associated with being a negative thing, so be careful how you use it. If you see something that is really something that someone would be interested in, you can say it is up their alley. This is an interesting, kind of funny phrase that we use to say that something is really suited to someone's interests. For instance, you might have someone in your life who really likes anime, and you see that the movie theater in town is showing some anime films. You can say that looks right up your alley. This means that it suits your interests very well.
Right up your alley.
English online is that sometimes these English teachers will teach you phrases and words that are completely antiquated and out of date, especially when it comes to idioms. But I pride myself on teaching you the English that you actually need to know. So when you guys comment, do English speakers actually say this? I always say, you best believe it. So that's the phrase that I first want to teach you. You best believe it.
You best believe it, Scroogey!
So this phrase, you best believe it, it's used when you want to emphasize something that is definitely true. For instance, you might ask me, do you think that I can actually speak English well? I'll say, you best believe it, because I really believe in you, and I think it's true. If you're studying my lessons, you're going to be able to speak English very well. So when you want to reassure someone, make sure they're not doubting something when they ask you a question, you can answer with, you best believe it. So right now in the United States, it is the back to school season. It just means that school's about to start for children who go to public school or universities or colleges here. And everybody's getting ready by buying their school supplies, getting new clothing to help fit their kids better. And for back to school season, I had a friend and she had a laptop for her son from last school year, and it should work again. And they turned it on and immediately it turned off. And so they thought, why is it acting up?
My phone's been acting up.
This phrase, acting up, it means that something is not working as it should. It's starting to break, but it's not completely broken yet. So they brought it to the store to see if they could have it repaired. And right when they got to the store, it turned on, it worked perfectly. And they said, well, sorry, we can't help you. It seems like it's working. They brought it home and it started acting up again. And they could not believe it. They're like, why is it not starting up? So when something like a computer acts up, it's not working as it should. Or if you have, an air conditioning in your house and it's starting to not work all the time, but you can still use it most of the time, you can use the phrase acting up. It's starting to act up. And with young children, sometimes we use this phrase as well, like they're acting up right now. This means their behavior is starting to become bad. Like maybe they are starting to hit other kids or be too loud or things like that. They are acting up is what we say. When I was in school, we have a test in the United States. It's called the ACT, and you take it before you try to get into college, and it helps show colleges, basically how intelligent you are, how well you can do on a test. Maybe not perfectly how intelligent you are, because I know really smart people that are not good test takers. Well, I had a friend, and her parents were very successful. One of her parents was a teacher. One of her parents was a businessman, and they wanted her to do really well on this test. And at the time, we were about 17 years old, she had a boyfriend who she was very obsessed with, very boy crazy over. That's sometimes what we say about young girls who start having a lot of interest in boys, and it seems like that's the only thing they can talk about. Anyway, to get to the point here, she had to take the ACT and she did terrible on it. She got a very bad score. And her parents were shocked. They said, what is going on? You need to stop being so boy crazy. You need to start focusing on school and studying for this test and take this test again and do well. And she did. They made her not, use her phone all the time, or they limited talking to the boyfriend. And so her test score from the first time she took it to the second time she took it was night and day.
I'll practice night and day.
And that's why I'm telling you this story. The phrase is night and day. When you say that something is night and day, it means it has changed dramatically. When I let my children stay up way too late, their behavior is night and day. So when they go to bed early, they have good behavior. When they go to bed way too late, they're tired the next day, they have bad behavior. Their behavior is night and day. So it just means there's a dramatic difference between the two things. If someone does some improvements on their house and you want to say, like, you've really changed it, you've done a really good job, the change is very dramatic, you can say, wow, it is night and day in here. That just means that the change is very dramatic. And usually we use this to compare something that was bad at first and good in the end, or you could say something was really good and it changed to be bad. It's night and day and changed to be bad. Have you ever learned the word mesmerizing?
It's mesmerizing.
Mesmerizing. I really like this word. I think it's a great advanced word to help describe when someone is very captivated by something or something is holding all of their attention. For instance, children are often mesmerized by the most simple things. Or you can say children are mesmerized by a television or a movie. It means it has their full attention and they can't focus on anything else. This summer, my children have been mesmerized by just going outside, playing in the dirt, and catching frogs. They don't want to do anything else. They catch a frog and they think it's so mesmerizing. They just want to study it and play with it. One thing that you could describe for adults that's mesmerizing is the Grand Canyon. In the United States, it's one of our national parks, one of our natural beauties, the Grand Canyon, because it's so deep and so long and wide. If you ever have been to a ballet recital with professional ballet dancers, you would describe their dancing as mesmerizing because the whole crowd just watches them and they just think it's so beautiful and their attention is on the dancers the whole time. It is mesmerizing. So typically we use this word mesmerizing when something is good, positive, and it's holding our attention. But sometimes you can say, like, children are mesmerized by the most simple things. The next phrase I really want to teach you about is to comb through a bunch of things.
He's going to comb through this place.
So oftentimes when you're looking for something specific, maybe you're looking for a document and there's a stack of documents, you're going to have to comb through the documents to find them. That just means go through them kind of slowly looking for a specific thing. Oftentimes when you lose something in your house, you're like, I'll have to comb through the laundry to find that shirt or whatever it might be. So comb through means you're searching for something. Now, another great phrase that goes right along with this is to go over something with a fine-tooth comb.
Run through them with a fine-tooth comb?
Maybe you've seen a fine-tooth comb before. I'm sure you have. It's very small little comb sticks in the comb. And when you comb your hair, if there was any dirt or fuzz or anything in your hair, it would get it out because it's very precise. So let's say you write an email and you want your colleague to look at the email and search for errors. You might say, can you go over this email with a fine-tooth comb looking for errors? This means you're going to have them look at it very, very closely. So when we're combing through things, we're usually looking through things. We're kind of looking at all the things in order to find what we're looking for. And when we go over something with a fine-tooth comb, we are going over it very slowly, very precisely. We're looking for errors or a very specific piece of information. Okay, so I am an English teacher, but even sometimes I can be completely stumped by grammar questions. I think that the problem with being a native speaker of English and also teaching English is, you know words and you know grammar just from speaking them. You haven't learned them as formally as some advanced English learners. So the word that I wanted to teach you here is stumped.
He's stumped.
If something is stumping you, It means it's confusing you or you don't know the answer. So for me, sometimes grammar questions can stump me. Now, I've studied enough grammar and I've studied, teaching styles and, as we call it, pedagogy to be a good English teacher, in my opinion. But sometimes I do say that non-native English speakers can make the best teachers, especially when it comes to grammar, because they can explain the grammar in such a way that would make sense to another English learner. Is there a grammar concept that absolutely stumps you in English? You just can't figure out how to use it? Let me know in the comments. Okay, this next expression is so useful. There's so many different ways that you can use it, and I'll teach you some of the most common ways right now. The expression is worked up.
Just to work up an appetite.
So this expression can mean you're agitated, like annoyed. It can mean you're excited, or it can just mean that you're very emotionally charged about something. So a common way that we use this phrase is we say we worked up the courage. Have you ever worked up the courage to walk up to someone famous and ask for a picture? Personally, I don't think I could work up the courage because I wouldn't feel bad if I asked them for a picture because I wouldn't want to bother them. Another really common way is you could say, have you worked up the courage to ask someone on a date ever? If you work up an appetite, we use this commonly to say that we did a lot of activity to make us hungry. That run really made me work up an appetite. That means that I had so much physical exercise that I'm hungry now. Another similar expression here is we work up a sweat. That means we're doing something. It's typically not exercise in this case. You can use this with exercise, but for instance, I was cleaning my house and I just worked up a sweat. That means I was cleaning so hard that I started sweating. It was like exercise, even though it wasn't meant to be exercise. I was just cleaning. Or if you're laying on the couch and you're just watching TV or scrolling through your phone, but you know that you have to get up and you have to maybe fold some laundry, you have to go mow the lawn, do some gardening, cook some food. You have to kind of work up the energy sometimes. This means that you have to kind of motivate yourself and feel like you're rested to get up and do the task. So we can work up an appetite, work up a sweat, work up courage, work up the energy. Those are 4 really common ways to use the phrase work up, but there are many more that you can use. For instance, you can say, that person is really worked up, meaning they're really annoyed about something. This next idiom is a really fun one in English. The idiom is elbow grease.
Relax. It just needs a little elbow grease.
So if you are cleaning something and it takes a lot of work and force and effort to actually get the dirt off, you can say, oh, this is taking a lot of elbow grease. And elbow grease just literally means effort or pressure. Or maybe you're, restoring something, you're making it look good. And instead of just, paying someone to do it or buying a whole new thing, you'll say, well, I can make this look good. It's just going to take some elbow grease. So elbow grease just means effort and physical work. When you're speaking English, you might hear someone say that they need to take out their anger on something.
Get out their aggression.
So maybe they have a lot of stress and anger built up from the day. Maybe they had a hard day at work, dealing with difficult people, and they just feel angry, but they don't want to snap at someone, meaning like yell at someone or act rude to them. So they say, I have to go take out my anger at the gym. Maybe they go work out, exercise, and the release of anger is through physical activity. Or if they don't take out their anger in a healthy way, maybe they do snap at someone and they yell at someone. They say, I'm so sorry to take my anger out on you. It's not your fault. You can also say, take out my aggression. Using this word is the exact same meaning, to take out your anger or to take out your aggression. If you want to say that you're just trying to release some stress and some anger, you can also use the idiom blow off some steam.
To blow off steam.
So a lot of times people who work really hard during the week, they like to have fun, they like to have a party, they like to just relax during the weekend because to them, that's how they blow off some speed. And think about this idiom kind of like a teapot. Once it boils and it has a lot of pressure inside of it, it goes, blows out the steam. So it's just a phrase that we use to say that we need to release some stress, anger, or just pressure in general. The last phrase that I want to teach you today is to snap at someone, which is relating to the last one. So when you snap at someone, it means you just have an angry or rude response to them. Maybe they say, hey, could you come help me make dinner? You say, oh, you're always asking me for help. They say, why did you snap at me? This means, why did you, act so rude so quickly to me?
Here's the snap. To snap.
It's funny because also in English, we commonly say, oh, snap, to say like, oh, shoot, or dang it. It's one of those words that we use sometimes like, oh, snap.
Oh, snap.
So it's a word that we use a lot to mean anger. Or if we say someone has snapped, it means that they were normal and then they had a lot of anger or stress release at one time. Thank you guys so much for studying English with me today. I hope you enjoyed these really casual but extremely useful English phrases. I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Comment below if you like these kind of casual, just come along with me to learn everyday English expressions, and I will totally make more. Thank you in advance for your feedback. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.